Chapter 29. The Soul-Devouring Tree. It has a long history, but it actually dares to extend its limbs to my side. The old man patted his robes as his green eyes looked towards the southeast. A chill flashed through his eyes as he sneered. "You're really seeking your own death." Seeing the old man suddenly emit a domineering aura, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. However, due to the other party's strength, she couldn't say anything. "I used to be too lazy to care about you, but now you've barged into my territory." The old man's mouth curled into a cold arc as he gently raised his arm. Under the curious gazes of Yin Nuashing and Yin Nuashing, he gently clenched his hand in the direction of the entrance. Bang! Following the clenching of his hand, mud and sand suddenly splashed in all directions 100 meters in front of the three people. A huge pitch-black tree branch broke out of the ground. At the same time, dozens of emerald tree roots sprang out from the surrounding ground and tightly wrapped around it. The moment the black tree root was entangled, it began to struggle violently. Waves of dense black gas erupted from it. An aura that was so dense that it was filled with death energy swiftly spread out, causing the light in this jade-green world to dim a little. However, without waiting for the black fog to completely spread out, the lumps of life around the glorious tree all rushed towards the black fog as if they had been guided. Just as the balls of light of life rushed into the black fog, a strong suction force erupted and sucked the strange black fog into the balls of light. Tens of thousands of balls of light worked fiercely at the same time. In just a few blinks of an eye, the spreading black fog had completely disappeared. After absorbing so much black chi, the green color of the balls of light of life didn't decrease in the slightest. They made a circle in the sky, and countless balls of life revolved around the soul, devouring trees' roots like a green vortex. As for the pitch-black tree root, it seemed to have sensed something and began to violently tremble. The jade-green tree root that was binding it also began to tremble slightly. In fact, as the two of them tugged at each other, the latter was even pulled out of the ground a little. The green balls of light also collided with the soul-devouring tree while it was struggling. Every place that the balls of light touched would leave a small green mark, as if the pitch-black tree had been assimilated. Although a single ball of light of life didn't have much effect, if there were tens of thousands of balls of light of life, then no matter how big the pitch-black tree root was, it was only a matter of time before it was completely corroded. Seeing that the tree root had been dyed green in a short moment, the old man softly spat out a word. Then, the dozens of emerald tree roots that were entangled around it with force. Boom! The black tree root that had turned into a green color couldn't withstand such a huge force and immediately shattered into pieces, disappearing with the wind. Following the shattering of the pitch-black soul-devouring tree's roots, a long stretch of dust that was 100 feet high suddenly appeared on the green ground. Then, under the astonished gazes of Yin Nuashing and Mu Yuchen, it extended towards the southeast. Suddenly, a cloud of dust flew out from the green area and spread across the chilling forest. Along the way, it destroyed countless icy trees and some pitch-black trees. The entire ghost forest was like an earthquake. Even the people far away in the camp could feel the tremors. One by one, they flew up to the eaves. They seemed to feel that a huge amount of energy was slowly brewing. The pitch-black energy vortex spiraled in the sky and covered the entire sky. At the bottom of the vortex, a huge black tree suddenly appeared. If Yin Nuashing was present, he would realize that this vortex was the one he saw in the sky when he first entered the ghastly forest. The vortex in the sky slowly rotated. Every time it rotated, it would cause the space to slightly fluctuate. Faintly, there was an unusually pure spiritual energy that spread out. Boom! The tremors that had spread through half of the ghastly forest finally reached the soul-devouring tree. The flying dust stopped a few dozen meters in front of the soul-devouring tree and suddenly exploded. Then, balls of green light filled with vitality directly rushed towards the soul-devouring tree. Buzz! The soul-devouring tree, which was suddenly attacked, was caught off guard as it hurriedly spat out black chi from its trunk and shade in all directions, blocking the rapidly approaching clusters of life light. On the ground, several hundred meters thick pitch-black tree roots suddenly broke out of the ground and soared into the sky. Countless amounts of sand fell from the sky. The black tree roots waved a few times in the sky, sending the green light clusters that were charging overflying, after which the clusters shrank and covered the enormous body of the soul-devouring tree. At the same time, a layer of black-colored energy barrier suddenly spread out, blocking the seemingly endless jade-green light clusters that were charging over. Facing the glories wool tree, the true overlord of the forest, there was still a big gap between it and the soul-devouring tree. Although it had been a little tyrannical and unbridled because the former did not pay attention to it, now that the master of the ghastly forest had awakened, it would not have good days ahead. The green balls of light collided with the black barrier and could only leave a faint green mark. Then, smoke rose and the thick wisp of vitality evaporated in an instant, not leaving a trace. Seeing that the corrosion was ineffective, the dark green ball of light turned around and no longer pounced on the energy shield. Instead, it quickly gathered 100 meters above the soul-devouring tree and slowly drew out a mysterious array that covered the entire black land. Buzz! As soon as the array appeared, a terrifying energy with endless vitality spread out in this area. The energy vortex in the sky was also drawn in. The end connected to the soul-devouring tree was actually cut off by the array. The endless energy contained in it was drawn into the array. The surrounding plants seemed to have sensed the overlord of the ghastly forest. The glorious tree's actions were somewhat restless. Emotions that humans could not feel intertwined together, as if they were negotiating something. A moment later, in the huge, ghastly forest, almost all the plants gradually emitted balls of various colors of energy. Some were big and some were small. Some were rich and some were shallow. As soon as the numerous balls of energy appeared, they paused in the sky for a moment before converging towards the huge emerald green array in the sky. An endless stream of balls of light connected together, like a huge vortex formed by thousands of energy threads. What followed was an almost limitless amount of energy. With such a huge amount of energy being poured in, the emerald light on the array gradually turned into a gorgeous multicolored color. The energy contained in it caused the sky and earth to tremble. From the looks of it, it seemed that the entire ghastly forest subconsciously wanted to eradicate the notorious soul-devouring tree. The huge colorful array hung above the soul-devouring tree. Feeling the energy contained in it, the entire soul-devouring tree couldn't help but tremble. Then a thick black light emitted from the soul-devouring tree and gathered on the layer of energy barrier, causing the blackness within to become even deeper and more bizarre. Destroy. After the rainbow-colored array in the sky condensed for a moment, a voice that seemed to come from the entire forest slowly descended from the sky. Shortly after, the rainbow-colored array violently trembled, and a rainbow-colored pillar of light that seemed to encompass an area of 100,000 feet in radius blasted into the ground below with the power to destroy the world. Boom! The colorful pillar of light shot straight into the sky, as if it was a trial, dyeing the entire sky in a gorgeous color. The enormous wind pressure exploded, and the sky within a radius of 5,000 kilometers was instantly cleared, leaving not even a trace of a cloud behind. At the same time that the light pillar exploded, almost everyone in the camp at the border of the ghastly forest turned their heads to the northeast. Looking at the light pillar that shot into the sky, a feeling of fear spread through their bodies. Even their souls trembled at this moment. What is that? Rumor has it that the guardian of the ghastly forest is about to awaken. So it's true. I didn't expect it to make such a big move as soon as it woke up. What a terrifying energy fluctuation. Even if a high-level god enters, I reckon they will only end up with their body and soul destroyed. There was a lot of discussion in the camp. Some people even boldly flew towards that place, wanting to go over and take a look. Outside the ghastly forest, Liao family. At this moment, the Liao family's head also looked at the energy pillar that shot into the sky. His old face was filled with a dignified expression. The energy contained in the light pillar made even him feel a kind of heartfelt fear. There aren't many things in the ghastly forest that have the ability to produce such a huge amount of energy. Could it be that the Gloriesville tree has come alive? After thinking for a moment, he bitterly smiled and shook his head. Then he sighed in his heart. I hope nothing big will happen. After pacing back and forth in the same place for a moment, the Liao family's head, who couldn't sit still, finally stomped his feet and flew towards the light pillar. The energy light pillar lasted for more than 10 seconds before slowly dissipating. Although the momentum was great, the situation below was not as terrifying as it looked on the surface. At this moment, the black land where the soul-devouring tree once stood had become a gorgeous color. The soul-devouring tree that stood between heaven and earth had disappeared without a trace. On the ground, a group of birds and beasts were lying together with a group of people. Moreover, there was also a huge ape. It was the ape king that was dragged away by the soul-devouring tree that day. However, from the looks of it, it seemed to have been released and had only fainted. Following the disappearance of the soul-devouring tree, all the creatures within it fell out. Not long after they were exposed, a gentle breeze blew past and directly turned them into flying ashes, dissipating into the world. It seemed that their life force and soul had been sucked dry, leaving behind only empty shells. Not far from this group of creatures, an emerald green energy circle spun a few times. The space fluctuated slightly and then dissipated, revealing Yin Nuoxing and the other two. Looking at this colorful place, Yin Nuoxing couldn't see the slightest trace of the soul-devouring tree. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing sucked in a breath of cold air. It's that! Looking up and seeing the huge whirlpool, Yin Nuoxing suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. A look of surprise flashed across his face. He clearly saw the huge energy whirlpool that day. He didn't expect it to be caused by the soul-devouring tree. 10,000 years green spiritual vine. However, Yin Nuoxing only glanced at the whirlpool in the sky and ignored it. He lowered his head and saw the black giant unconscious on the ground. He also saw the emerald green vine in the latter's hand. He immediately cried out in joy and hurriedly ran over. Little brat, slow down, Yuan helplessly reminded him. Seeing that he was as excited as a child, she couldn't help but smile. Her eyes curved into crescent moons. Little girl, wait. The old man, or rather the tree spirit, stroked his beard and looked at Yin Nuoxing. Then, he gently called out to Yuan. Senior, is there anything I can help you with? Yuan turned around and asked curiously. The old man smiled and waved his sleeves gently. A dense emerald green energy emerged from his body and enveloped Yuan. Then, the latter felt that the elemental fire that she had lost was gradually recovering. In just a few seconds, she had returned to her previous state and was even stronger than before. Yuan was stunned. Feeling the burning flames in her body, she smiled happily and cupped her hands at the old man. She smiled and said, Thank you, sir. The old man smiled and shook his head. He waved his sleeves again, and 5 9-meter-long emerald-like branches flew into Yu Yin's hand. He smiled and said, Give this to him. Hearing this, Yuan nodded and solemnly kept the branches. The old man stared at Yin Nuoxing for a while, then smiled and turned his gaze to Yuan. He smiled and said, All right, I hope you can always accompany him in the future. After saying this, he didn't care about Yuan, who had a strange expression on her face because of his words, and slowly walked to the side. Seeing that the old man had said something out of the blue and then ignored them, Yuan muttered in her heart. She held a branch with her hands behind her back and slowly walked to Yin Nuoxing. Quietly walking to the side, the old man looked up at the whirlpool in the sky and started walking again. When he reached the bottom of the whirlpool, he lowered his head and squatted down. Then, he used his withered hands to gently dig at the ground. After digging a few centimeters into the ground, the old man came into contact with a hard object. He raised his eyebrows and let out a strange laugh. He took out the object and placed it in his palm. After staring at it for a long time, he sighed and disappeared in a flash. At this time, the huge whirlpool in the sky gradually dissipated. After forcibly pulling the 10,000 years green spiritual vine from the arm of the giant ape, Yin Nuashing turned his head to look at Yuin, who was slowly walking over. He looked around, and when he didn't see the old man who claimed to be the Glorious Tree, he couldn't help but ask, "Where's the old man?" Tilting her head, a strand of her long black hair floated down. Yuin copied him and shrugged her shoulders. Then, under his helpless gaze, she walked to his side and sat down gently. She took out the emerald branch from her back and placed it in his hand. "This is—" After receiving the branch, Yin Nuashing was slightly surprised. He felt the wood element in his body become active and couldn't help but exclaim, "What a rich wood element energy! It might be able to increase the purity of the wood element in my body." However, the last sentence was said as softly as a mosquito. Little brat, what did you say?" Although his voice was soft, it was still heard by Yuin. She couldn't help but raise her head and look at Yin Nuashing's silly smile. She immediately moved her but closer to him and whispered with a smirk, "Nothing." Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes at her. He guiltily turned his head away and put away the branch. "Little brat." Yuin smiled and put her red lips on his ear. Her lily-white hand gently caressed his handsome face. Her voice was charming and moving as she said with a smirk, "Tell big sister, how many elements do you have in your body?" I'll tell you, okay. It's too close." Yin Nuashing's body trembled as a warm and fragrant wind blew past his ear. His handsome face flushed red as he clawed at the floor with both hands. He hurriedly retreated a few meters away before shouting, "3, just 3. Yin Nuashing stretched out 3 trembling fingers and forced a grin. Yuin smiled and raised her eyebrows. Her eyes narrowed as she continued to smile. "Which element doesn't count? The wood element isn't very pure, so—" Yin Nuashing tilted his head and thought as he spoke. Before he could finish, he suddenly screamed. Only then did he realize that he had been tricked. You. Yin Nuashing's face flushed red as he pointed at Yuin in anger and embarrassment. He opened his mouth wide and couldn't say anything for a long time. Little brat, you're really a little brat." Yuin helplessly held her forehead. She didn't think that it would be so easy to trick him. She walked a few steps closer and pulled him up from the ground. She said with a bit of displeasure, "Why didn't you tell me? Do you think I'm an outsider?" "About that." Yin Nuashing's cheeks trembled, and he was so anxious that he broke out in cold sweat. After a moment, he had a flash of inspiration and said with a smile, "I was afraid that it would hurt you if I told you." "Screw you. I won't be hurt by you. I'm a demon." Yuin pursed her lips and rolled her eyes at him. "Demon-level talent. You were just a little lazy in the past." Yin Nuashing helped her say this sentence that he had said countless times before. "Little brat, how dare you steal my lines? You're revolting." Yuin heard this and gritted her teeth. Her jade-like hand unrestrainedly pinched his face and ravaged it with all her might. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have stolen your lines. I let down my sister and the country." Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly as his face hurt from being pinched. TSK. While Yin Nuashing were fooling around, the sound of something breaking through the air came from the horizon and attracted their attention. When they saw a large group of people rushing over, Yin Nuashing's face instantly turned pale while Yuin looked at him strangely. "That's a fairy. Oh my god. This was where the soul-devouring tree used to be. Why is it gone? Could have been killed." "What? The soul-devouring tree was killed? A fairy? How is that possible? Could it be that she did it?" "Oh, woo. Fairy, I finally see you again. I won't marry anyone but you in this life. Let's cultivate our relationship. Let's grow the purest flowers." Suddenly, a wolf howl came from the horizon, causing everyone to be stunned. They all turned their gazes and saw a young man rushing over from afar in a hurry. This person was the one who was shouting that he would not marry anyone who was not from Yin Nual planet. I won't give up." However, Before he could finish speaking, he was sent flying by the angry crowd and an embarrassed Yin Nuashing. Instantly, they saw a shooting star quickly disappear into the horizon. Oh no, someone is coming. Yin Nuashing's face was ashen. She hurriedly took out a hat and put on her head. Then, she pulled Yuan and turned to leave. Fairy, please wait, Seeing that they were about to leave, Liao Ming, who was heavily injured and wrapped in bandages, immediately panicked. He stretched out his right hand that could only move on the back of a golden rock and hurriedly shouted, "Pervert!" Hearing the shout, Yin Nuashing turned around instinctively. When she saw that the person who shouted was Liao Ming, whom she had seen the other day, her face turned even more green. She cursed in a coquettish female voice. Then, she pulled Yuan. With a flash of the light element, the two of them turned into a bright beam of light and rushed into the horizon, leaving behind a group of dazed people. That's the light element. What a fast speed. It's impossible for anyone who isn't a god level to catch up. That's not speed. The fastest speed is infinitely close to the speed of light. Once you reach the god level and become a god, you can break the rules and surpass the speed of light easily. Hiss! Surpass the speed of light? At that time, you'll be able to reverse time and space. Seeing Yin Nuashing and Yin Nuashing leave, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They had never seen the light element in their lives. It was the rarest element in the world. On the golden rock, the old man standing at the front looked at Liao Ming and shook his head helplessly. Ming, you were rejected. Very thoroughly, without the slightest hesitation. No, father, I believe I still have a chance. Liao Ming clenched his fists and looked at the beautiful figure in the distance with a grin. However, he accidentally pulled on his wound and immediately sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. If Yin Nuashing and the others heard this, they would probably receive a golden slap, and Yuan would probably roll on the ground laughing. In passing, she would say, "You're a girl." Chapter 30. News of what happened in the ghost forest spread to the outside world within a day. Regardless of whether it was the human race, the demon race, or the beast race, everyone was paying attention to this matter. A heaven-defying goddess had appeared in the human race, and she possessed the legendary light element, defeating the ape king, destroying the forbidden area, and exterminating the soul-devouring tree. The reputation of the dignified forbidden area had weakened quite a bit within a day. And the third piece of news also made everyone apprehensive. So it turned out that there was such a dangerous existence in the mysterious ghost forest. In this way, the whereabouts of the numerous experts who had mysteriously disappeared had been found. And this also gave a reasonable explanation for the various strange phenomena in the ghost forest. Everything was set up by the soul-devouring tree, and it was simply impossible for ordinary people to break through. This time, if it wasn't for Yin Nuashing coincidentally using the Netherworld Ruins sword to destroy the spatial folds in the ghost forest, the soul-devouring tree probably wouldn't have been awakened, and there wouldn't have been any later events. Moreover, that was a living creature that had inherited the spirituality of heaven and earth. Although it was notorious, it was also protected by the power of heaven and earth. Even if it was a god, they wouldn't dare to casually destroy it, as it would harm the harmony of heaven and earth. Only living creatures of the same level could destroy it without any misgivings. The truth of what happened that day was also understood by everyone, and they couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Because the soul-devouring tree was exterminated by the glories will tree, but what made everyone exclaim in surprise wasn't the destruction of the soul-devouring tree, but rather another tree, the glories will tree that was ranked third on the treasure of heaven and earth ranking. Legend has it that a drop of its juice could revive the dead and prolong their life. It was said that it could even save a person's last breath. A leaf could condense one's own energy and increase the purity of the wood element. A branch could go against heaven and earth and change the rules of heaven and earth. Tree roots could replace meridians. Tree rings could see past and present lives. Tree bark was the hardest material. Tree core could replace the heart, and a fruit could defy the heavens and change one's fate, resurrect the dead. awaken a sleeping soul, and even reform a scattered soul, calling it back from the underworld, and so on. In short, it was a treasure tree that was full of treasures. All the experts in the divine world, especially those who were nearing the end of their lifespans, were doing their utmost to find a way to extend their lifespans. The grand elders of the major forces were no exception. They would all risk their lives to find a way to extend their lifespans. Naturally, this tree was also the target of countless people. Unfortunately, many people had spent their entire lives trying to find a way to obtain it, but they were still unable to find a trace of it. To this creature that was almost as old as heaven and earth, the soul-devouring tree was probably no different from an ant trying to shake a tree. The former had existed for an immeasurable amount of time, and people guessed that its strength should not be inferior to a rebirth realm expert. Even so, on the day the news spread, there were still experts who rushed to the Ghost Chi forest in search of this legendary tree. Although they all knew that they might not be able to survive if they went, they still rushed over like moths to a flame. But the strange thing was that on the day the Glorious tree was exposed, it disappeared without a trace. Even Yin Nuashing was unable to find it before she left. The original emerald green land had already transformed into an ordinary earthy yellow color, and the vigorous vitality that pervaded the land had also disappeared. The land within a radius of 10,000 li had become a flat land, as if the Glorious tree had never existed. If it wasn't for the emerald leaf on the ground and the 5-9-meter-long branches in Yun Nuashing's pendant, he might have really thought it was just a dream. On the leaf that fell to the ground, there were 4 words written lightly: "We will meet again." Looking at the leaf lying quietly in the palm of her hand, Yin Nuashing and Yu Yin both had strange expressions on their faces. Countless people had turned the Ghost Chi forest upside down. Now that the soul-devouring tree was gone, the Ghost Chi forest was no longer dangerous and mysterious in everyone's eyes. Naturally, there wasn't that much fear. However, after everyone's search for close to 2 months without any results, the disturbance gradually subsided. At this time, the ghostly forest had already changed beyond recognition. A dignified, forbidden area of a generation had been stripped to the point that its skin was split open and its flesh was exposed. It was almost naked, and it made people sigh. Only the Death Soul mountain range in the center had not been trampled by people. It was said that a god at the level of a god carelessly stepped into this area, but as soon as he entered, he was blasted into ashes by an indescribable energy. After hearing this news, the impudent people became much more restrained and no longer dared to casually wander around the Ghost Chi forest. They were afraid that disaster would descend, and they would end up with their souls scattered. Only after half a year had passed did the disturbance completely calm down. However, the outside world did not calm down with it. Unable to find the Glorious tree, the people who were unwilling to be left out began to search for the legendary goddess. They wanted to see if her valiance was real or not. Of course, there were also many young men who wanted to try their luck and see if they could get close to her. Among them, there were naturally people who wanted to compete and test their own cultivation. Even the vast region could not stop the spread of the news. One person spread to 10, and 10 to 100. In less than half a year, even the other 3 origin regions, as well as the central divine province, knew that there was such a person in the Sourcepeak region. The people of the Fire God Shrine, Lightning God Shrine, and Xian family all confirmed that this woman was the vague acquaintance they had painstakingly searched for. However, they did not spread the news. They also strictly ordered all the disciples not to say a single word and continue to use that vague side profile as a missing person notice. This was because they knew that if the news were to spread, it would bring about serious trouble to the goddess. They were not unscrupulous people and would not provoke a person for no reason. Even so, there were still many people who could tell that the person on the missing person notice was the currently famous Sourcepeak goddess. Immediately, those experts who had nothing better to do became spirited. Every day, in the heavens and the earth, there was no one who did not want to capture the goddess. If they could capture the goddess, they could also make friends with the 3 major forces. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, why not? Since they were recognized, the fire god shrine and lightning god shrine did not deliberately hide it. They only jointly warned the world that if they hurt even a strand of her hair, it was equivalent to becoming their enemy. It had to be said that the joint name of the two major forces was still very intimidating. At the very least, it intimidated many people who wanted to use unscrupulous means. Although the prize was good, one had to be alive to enjoy it. No one dared to question the strength of the two major temples. However, to everyone's surprise, it didn't take long before the other 7 temples of the 9 Elements Temple announced that they would join the search. Especially the appearance of the Light Temple. It scared the entire divine world to the point that it trembled. The Light God Shrine was the strongest temple of the 9 elemental temples. However, they were very few in number. It was said that they only had less than 100 people. There were only a few elders, but all of them were famous figures in the cultivation world. Everyone in the Light God Shrine possessed the light element. Those 100 or so members were probably the only ones who possessed the light element in the divine world. And their return this time was also very obvious because of the news that the goddess possessed the light element. The 9 elemental temples were originally on good terms. Their ancestors had even gone through life and death together, so they naturally wouldn't be at odds with each other. This time, the Fire God Shrine and Lightning God Shrine had something to do. Even if they didn't ask for help, they would do it themselves. The Xian family also had a good relationship with the 9 elemental temples. Helping them to search for the missing person was an easy task. And the Qin family, who was also one of the 8 great ancient families, also inexplicably joined the search. They said to the outside world, as one of the 8 great ancient families, they should help each other. Actually, only a portion of the Qin family had a good relationship with the Xian family. Furthermore, according to the insider, it was a certain higher-up of the Qin family who wanted to search for the goddess. The world was shocked. The 9 elemental temples and the 2 great ancient families formed a super luxurious lineup. What could they not find? They could practically flip the entire Sourcepeak region upside down, right? And when the outside world was in an uproar, the main character of the storm, the goddess, Yin Oshing, had disappeared from everyone's sight. No one could find her, including the luxurious 11 Search Alliance. In a tranquil mountainous region, towering trees were swaying in the wind, releasing a refreshing aura, making the scorching hot weather a bit cooler. There was a lake at the top of the mountain. A gentle breeze blew past, and the calm surface of the lake made this place a bit more tranquil. Behind the wooden house next to the lake, a huge dark green cocoon of light was suspended a foot above the ground. The dark green threads connected the surrounding ancient trees, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon. It was emitting a faint light, pulsing rhythmically with its heartbeat. If one looked carefully inside, one could see a slender body quietly sleeping. Its aura was also becoming more and more powerful with the passage of time. On the edge of the cliff, the Netherworld Sword, Divine Mirror of Light, Divine Sun Bow, and Golden Chain each occupied a position, sealing the mountaintop in a barrier. Using 3 high-grade divine tools and 1 godly weapon to set up a formation, even a high-level god might not be able to see through it. It could be said to be impregnable. On the edge of the cliff in the distance, the space fluctuated slightly. After a moment, the space slowly split open, and the graceful figure of Yin walked in gently. She was still wearing a bright red dress, and her beautiful face was slightly flushed. She looked very attractive. After Yin walked in, the crack behind her slowly closed, and the space became as smooth as a mirror again. Looking up at the calm sky, Yin walked to the back of the wooden house with light steps. Looking at the huge, dark green cocoon of light, she couldn't help but sigh. It had already been 5 months, and Yin Nuoshing had been sleeping all this time. Ever since Yin and the others found this place that day, Yin Nuoshing had forcibly broken a third of a heavenly spirit branch, as well as half of the spirit leaves on this branch, and stuffed them into her hands. She took this branch that was 6 meters long and didn't have many leaves left, and went into seclusion to preserve the rest. Because it was the purest wood element, Its effect on Yin was not as great as it was on yin washing. However, because it had the effect of condensing energy, after Yin refined those few leaves, the energy in the form of an airflow was immediately condensed into a solid state. In her lower abdomen, a hard rock-like object was spinning, and it was even a little bit turning into a crystal. The fiery red color was very dazzling, and within this fiery red, there were traces of dark green. That was the wood element, and it was extremely pure and surging with boundless vitality. In other words, she was the first to step into the dual element domain, and her cultivation had also soared from quasi-mortal rank 1 to mortal rank 8. Regarding this, other than being speechless, Yin was also a little happy. Who would be happy to see their strength increase? However, the increase was too fast. It was an entire realm and a half. This speed was simply enough to scare people to death. How was this sitting on a plane? This was simply flying a rocket. Although it was said that the faster one crossed the mortal rank, the better, this was too fast. However, Yin was a little regretful. If she could refine it into a pill, the effect will be multiplied. Moreover, using such precious things on them was simply a waste of God's gifts. Fortunately, she left behind a few dozen pieces and didn't use all of them. Are you still not awake? Walking to the side of the cocoon of light, Yin stretched out her jade hand and lightly patted it. She couldn't help but sigh, and her tone was a little lonely and bored. Do you know that the outside world is talking about you, the goddess? Many large forces are looking for you. Every day, many people pass by here, but they can't see through the barrier here. Liao family's head is also sending people out, saying that he wants to find a daughter-in-law for their young master, Liao Ming. Looks like he has suffered quite a blow and is relying on you. When you wake up, we'll go and take care of him together. Everyone says that you definitely reincarnated wrongly and gave birth to a boy. The outside world is saying that you're a young lady, and there isn't a boy called Yin Nuashing. Little wimp, quickly wake up. Big sister is so bored. Didn't you want to rush to the central divine continent? How can you stop here? Little wimp, I know you can hear me. Can you give me a reply? Big sister is afraid of being lonely, ah. Little star, answer me, ah. Every day, Yin would stay beside the cocoon of light for a long time, softly whispering. She was happy, excited, and also tired until night fell, and it was another purple full moon night. A mysterious purple light descended on the earth, covering everything in a gorgeous purple glow. The night was hazy, and it was quiet and peaceful. The purple light sprinkled down, reflecting on the person and the cocoon below. The faint light woke the person who had unknowingly fallen asleep. Her slender eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes against the moonlight. Yin blankly looked at the dim surroundings, then looked at the light cocoon again. She sadly stood up, and her delicate hand somewhat bitterly stroked the light cocoon that alternated between dark green and purple. Looks like there won't be any results today. Sighing, Yin turned around with a bitter smile. Just as she was about to enter the small house, the emerald light cocoon suddenly emitted a gentle light. A soft laughter made her suddenly stop in her tracks. I heard you, oh. Chapter 31. I heard it. I heard it very clearly. You call my name. It's been so long, but this is the first time I've heard it. I've heard it every day. I want to respond to you immediately, but I can't make a sound. Sister Yin, thank you for your company. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. Yin Nuashing said gently from within the cocoon. At this moment, he let himself play the role of a good younger brother and comforted Yin gently because he felt ashamed and touched. This was the first time he spoke so gently to Yin. Brat, you're finally awake. Yin froze for a moment, then suddenly became excited. Although there was a faint complaint in her voice, there was more joy than anything else. After all, the two of them had ventured into the god realm together and left home. They were the closest people to each other. Now, one was sleeping, and the other was so bored that he was almost moldy. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. Yin Nuashing transmitted in a gentle voice from within the cocoon. There was a hint of playfulness in his voice. It's good that you're awake. I want you to go shopping with me. Let's eat together. Play with me until I go crazy. Walk with me in the starry sky. Yuen used her excited voice to hide her feelings of wanting to cry. But Mei Mao failed to live up to her expectations and condensed mist. All right, you can do whatever you want. Yin Nuashing agreed, then hurriedly transmitted, back off first. I'm about to break through. Something seems to be happening. Let the Netherworld sword and the others expand the barrier to its greatest extent. All right. Although Yuen was a little confused, she still retreated. She came to the Netherworld sword at the edge of the cliff and hurriedly said a few words. Buzz. The Netherworld ruins sword responded, and the long sword glowed faintly. 3 purplish-black rays of light shot out from its body, connecting the divine mirror of light, the divine sun bow, and the golden chains together. After the rays of light were connected, the boundary slowly expanded under Yu Yin's gaze and finally enveloped an area of 10,000 miles. Be careful, Yin Nuashing reminded Yuen. Then, many complicated runes suddenly appeared on the dark green light cocoon. The energy quickly surged, and the vast amount of energy of heaven and earth was drawn. Like a wave, it let out a wallala sound and surged into the light cocoon. Boom! The surroundings suddenly darkened. There was no light in the world. In the sky, a huge dark cloud had gathered. Light blue lightning danced like wild dragons. At the same time, there were also golden, red, metallic, and dark green lightning. The dark cloud was dyed into a gorgeous 5-colored thundercloud. Heavenly tribulation? Yu Yin's cherry lips gaped open, her pretty face filled with disbelief. Normally, heavenly tribulation would only descend when a strange energy was born. For example, when one's cultivation attained a certain realm, or when one created a new high-grade secret technique, or when one was born into a divine rank weapon, or when one was formed into a high-grade formation. All of these would cause heavenly tribulation that possessed destructive energy to descend, of course. There was also the most special kind. Due to one's own special constitution or special energy, it wasn't uncommon for heavenly tribulation to descend when one was advancing. Just like Yin Nuashing now, possessing 4 elements, advancing to the ordinary rank was a qualitative leap. It was really inexcusable if one didn't get struck by lightning. Little star, be careful. Yuen thought it through and felt relieved. Then, she hurriedly reminded Yin Nuashing. However, although heavenly tribulation was difficult to overcome, there were endless benefits once one overcame it. Heavenly tribulation was one of the best ways to temper one's body. Being struck by lightning more often would increase one's physical strength. Of course, the prerequisite was that one had to be able to withstand it. If one's body and soul were destroyed by lightning, it would be useless no matter how much one broke through qi. As the thunderclouds churned, they suddenly shrank. A golden lightning bolt descended first. Like a giant python, it burst out from the clouds and pierced through the sky. With terrifying crackling sounds, it fiercely pounced on the cocoon formed by Yin Nuashing. The light cocoon trembled lightly a few times. A wisp of green light rapidly flowed within the cocoon and broke free from the threads. Then, it floated above the valley and took the initiative to welcome the heavenly tribulation. Golden light flowed on the surface of the light cocoon. The dark green runes suddenly erupted with a powerful suction force. The golden lightning that danced on the surface of the light cocoon dimmed in an instant and finally disappeared. Boom! Boom! The dazzling thunderbolts were like giant dragons roaring in the sky as they danced wildly in the sky. They were accompanied by resplendent thunderbolts as they swept down from all directions. Finally, they bombarded the glowing cocoon that was emitting a fluorescent light in the air. The lightning bolts ruthlessly landed on the light cocoon. Gorgeous rainbow-colored lightning overflowed and turned into countless tiny lightning snakes. They endlessly burrowed into the light cocoon and surged into Yin Nuashing's body. From afar, the light cocoon looked like it was filled with lightning. After a long time, The thunderclouds seemed to know that a single golden heavenly tribulation wouldn't be able to do anything to Yin Nuashing. A moment later, golden, red, silver white, light blue, and dark green lightning bolts came crashing down from the sky and fiercely bombarded the dark green light cocoon. A vast amount of energy streaked across the sky, and the overflowing energy caused the valley to tremble slightly. The earth-shattering sound of the thunderstorm caused Yu'in to quickly cover her ears. She felt as if her eardrums were about to be pierced. Boom! Kacha! 5 types of lightning intertwined and continuously bombarded the light cocoon. The dark green runes ruthlessly refined all of them and poured them into the light cocoon. However, because there were too many of them, it couldn't completely refine all of them. Some of the powerful destructive energy passed through the runes and seeped into the light cocoon. Immediately, a crisp cracking sound could be heard. The changes in the light cocoon made Yin Nuashing's brows twitch. However, he didn't panic. It should be said that he couldn't panic even if he wanted to. He didn't know how this light cocoon was formed, but it restricted his movements. When the heavenly tribulation arrived, he could only passively endure it. Little star, Yuyin's pretty face was pale. She wanted to go over and help, but she also knew that the power of the heavenly tribulation would multiply if there were many people. Therefore, she didn't act rashly. She could only watch anxiously from aside. Her white teeth gently bit her red lips. She didn't know what to do. I'm fine. Don't worry. Yin Nuashing comforted her from within the cocoon. In the sky, thunder rumbled endlessly. The churning 5-colored thunderclouds constantly spewed out bolts of increasingly powerful lightning. Then, they all struck the light cocoon. Every time they struck, the cracks on the surface of the light cocoon would widen a little. Yin Nuashing and Yu'in felt their hearts palpitate. After more than half an hour, the thunderclouds seemed to become a little angry after failing to take down the light cocoon for a long time. The 5 thunderclouds guarding a corner suddenly rubbed together and slowly fused together. In just a moment, a 5-colored thundercloud that covered an area of 1,000 miles was gradually born. Every inch of the 5-colored thundercloud was surging with 5-colored lightning. The crackling sounds were terrifying. A huge black hole appeared in the center of the clouds. The 5-colored lightning that was 1,000 feet wide crossed the space and came crashing down in an earth-shattering manner. When it landed in midair, it suddenly changed direction and pointed at the light cocoon in midair. Crack! Hundreds of bolts of lightning that contained terrifying power poured down on the light cocoon like a rainstorm. Immediately, a series of crisp cracking sounds resounded in the sky. Crack! Crack! Under the violent bombardment of the lightning, the light cocoon continued to fall. Cracks appeared on its surface, and the surrounding space began to fluctuate under the bombardment of the lightning. Suddenly, a row of scarlet runes appeared on the surface of the light cocoon. They began to revolve around the light cocoon. The complexity of the runes wasn't inferior to the original runes on the light cocoon. Could it be that the heavenly tribulation isn't as powerful as I imagined? Yu'in had a strange expression on her face as she looked at the light cocoon that was still intact after the heavenly tribulation. However, when she saw the space trembling slightly, this thought disappeared. Furthermore, she could sense that the energy contained in the light cocoon was becoming more and more majestic under the bombardment of the lightning. The beautiful thunderbolts that kept falling made Yin Nuashing, who was in the light cocoon, a little worried. As more and more thunderbolts surged into the light cocoon, he could feel that the 2 talismans were operating at their maximum efficiency. Even the 2 talismans had some cracks, as if they could not withstand the increasingly powerful thunderbolts. The 5-colored thundercloud was ruthless. The lightning bolts seemed to be free as they turned into a pool of lightning that came crashing down. It was no longer a single 5-colored lightning bolt, but a large pool of 5-colored lightning. The overflowing energy made Yin Nuashing, who was in the middle of the bombardment, break out in cold sweat. Boom! Lightning flashed, and the overflowing energy made Yu'in shudder. She really didn't know what it would be like to be in the middle of it. Crack! Crack! The speed at which the light cocoon fell off increased. At this moment, only half of Yin Nuashing was covered. The other half was only covered by a thin layer of membrane. It looked fragile, but it didn't immediately shatter. Boom! The five-colored heavenly tribulation was undoubtedly extremely terrifying. The torrential thunderbolts continued for half an hour. After this hellish half an hour, the sky was ravaged by the gorgeous thunderbolts. Even the boundary was slightly damaged. Boom! The remaining light cocoon was blasted to the ground, creating a pit that was dozens of feet wide. The ground sank a few meters, and dust flew everywhere. Little Star, Yu'in hurriedly ran over when she saw that the heavenly tribulation had dissipated. She had resisted for so long. Could it be that she had failed at the last moment? I'm fine. In the dust, Yin Nuashing's faint laughter came out, making Yu'in immediately put down the huge stone hanging in her heart. She waved her sleeves and suppressed the dust in the sky, revealing the light cocoon in the center. At this moment, only a thin layer of crystal membrane was left. Green and red runes appeared on the surface of the light cocoon. Five-colored energy flowed rapidly into the runes, feeding the energy back to Yin Nuashing. Cracks quickly appeared on the crystal membrane, and a green light illuminated the entire valley. It was as if there were thousands of rays of light dancing. The green and purple light intertwined, and it was hazy and dreamy. The person in the light cocoon slowly stood up. His slender body slowly stretched out. He was wrapped in black clothes, and the wide black windbreaker was folded around his body like a screen. His soft, ink-black hair fell behind him, past his hips, and fell between his thighs. His handsome face was crystal clear, and it was as if he was carved from jade. One could not help but want to touch him. His pitch-black eyes were dyed with a faint golden light, revealing some innocence and playfulness. His slender eyebrows and eyes were naturally curved into crescents, and his red lips were raised at an angle, making him seem more amiable and approachable. The light gradually dissipated, and 6 black wings that were 20 feet long appeared on his back. The feathers were gently stretched and swayed with the breeze. Under the purple moonlight, he gave off a mysterious, sacred, and inviolable feeling. Yin Nuashing stretched and took a deep breath. His face, which was still 14 or 15 years old, was filled with intoxication. I'm finally out. After sleeping for 5 months, I almost became stupid, Yin Nuashing said in a low voice. He narrowed his eyes, raised his head, and took a deep breath. He looked like he was enjoying himself. PFFF. When Yu'in heard this, she could not help but laugh. She walked over to his side and reached out to touch his head. She smiled gently and said, "Little Star, you're finally awake." Then, she reached out to touch the wings behind him. The soft feeling of the feathers coming from her fingertips made Yu'in feel a little intoxicated. So beautiful. Yin Nuashing scratched his head and looked back at the wide wings with a strange expression. He did not know how he had grown a pair of wings after sleeping. With a smile, the huge wings folded and wrapped around Yu'in. Yin Nuashing turned to look at her and said with a smile, "I thought you would say that I turned into a birdman." Yu'in rolled her eyes at him and moved her hand from the wings to his handsome face. Then she pinched him a few times. "Brat, you made me wait for so long. You actually heartlessly left me to sleep for 5 months. Tell me, how are you going to make it up to me? I was wrong. I shouldn't have slept for 5 months. No, I shouldn't have slept for 5 months. I let down the country and my sister. I was wrong." Yin Nuashing endured the pain from his face and grinned. He wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and hurriedly said, "PFFF." Then the two of them laughed together. This kind of banter and heartless greeting was still more suitable for them. "What level are you at now?" After laughing for a while, Yu'in pulled back a strand of hair that fell in front of her forehead and asked, "I'm probably at mortal rank 6? I can't suppress my realm. It's too early to use this kind of thing to increase my strength. The energy can't be fully used, and a lot of it has dissipated into the world." Yin Nuashing tilted his head and said with uncertainty. There was a hint of regret in his voice. Indeed, the age of the glories will tree was comparable to the age of heaven and earth. The energy it contained was shocking. Even though Yun Nuashing tried his best to suppress it, his cultivation still crossed over half a realm. This was also because the spirit energy in his body had condensed into a crystal. If his spirit energy was in the form of a gas, it would not be a problem for him to reach mortal rank 4 in one step. Too fast. However, your cultivation is finally lower than mine, Yu'in said with a frown. Suddenly, she laughed happily. After all, your talent is monstrous. I can't compare to you. Yin Nuashing stuck out his tongue and covered his mouth. He said the words that he always said and then ran away. Little brat, how dare you laugh at me? Stop right there. Yu'in stomped her feet in anger and embarrassment. She moved and turned into a streak of light to chase after him. Aha! Come on, chase me. Stop right there. Chapter 32. Yun Nuashing had successfully broken out of seclusion, but the two of them were not in a hurry to leave this place. This place naturally condensed the surrounding energy of heaven and earth. They planned to completely control this level of energy before leaving. According to Yu'in, he was now being watched by the world. There would definitely be many people who would persevere in searching for him, wanting to capture him and bring him to the Fire God Shrine to receive the award. This made his face turn ashen, and at the same time, he was confused. He did not know why those people were looking for him. Although he was depressed, he calmed down and thought about it carefully. Unless there was something special that drew the attention of others away from Yun Nuashing, he really could only live in seclusion in the mountains. The low-key little star is being watched by the world. She's about to be plucked from the starry sky. Yu'in covered her mouth and laughed. Yun Nuashing looked at her with hidden bitterness, of course. The two of them had rejected the idea of going down the path of an ascetic monk from the beginning. Then, they would have to show their faces in the secular world. Since that was the case, they had to hide their tracks. The production of his snow flame facial skin had to be sped up. We've already gotten the 10,000 years green spiritual vine. Now we still have the flame flower. We haven't found the ice crystal yet, Yu'in said as she counted. Little star, why don't you just get married? There are many people in the outside world who want to marry you. Among them, there are many superpowers. Once you marry into a rich family, there won't be any problems with any materials, Yu'in teased. Then why are we looking for these things? Yun Nuashing looked at her with hidden bitterness. Since they had already walked right into the trap, there was no need for these things, right? Seriously, a group of people are all blind. Do they really not see clearly, or are they doing it on purpose? I'm a man. Yun Nuashing could not help but nag. Every time she received news, it was about a girl, but the main point was that he was a man. I feel like I'm treating you as Princess Taiping because your face really doesn't look like it's on a boy's body. Moreover, you don't have an Adam's apple, Yu'in said seriously as she sized him up. Yun Nuashing was stunned as she touched her throat. Then, her gaze became even more bitter. Since Little Star doesn't want to be taken away and doesn't want to get married, then let's hurry up and find those two damned materials. Yun Nuashing gritted her teeth and spoke first. Hearing this, Yu'in smiled and shook her head. Her delicate hands excitedly grabbed Yun Nuashing. Under his surprised gaze, she smiled and said, "Let's go eat, drink, and play." After saying that, without waiting for the stunned Yun Nuashing to react, he directly lifted the shocked and pale Yun Nuashing with one hand and jumped off the cliff while laughing. Don't. Ah. A mournful wail echoed through the mountain range. The bustling city was dyed with the unique aura of the mortal world. Loud shouts could be heard in the streets and alleys, making Yun Nuashing, who was far away, feel nostalgic. Living in this world, it was inevitable that people would be tainted by smoke and fire. If you don't stand tall, you'll be like shaking your clothes in the dust or standing in the mud. How can you surpass yourself? If you don't take a step back, you'll be like a moth flying toward a candle or a sheep touching the fences. How can you be happy? In a room or restaurant, Yun Nuashing stood on the balcony and raised a cup of tea to the sky. He sighed heavily and slowly drank it with a strange expression. Little star, why do you look so sad? Are you not happy coming out to play? Yuan walked to Yun Nuoxing's side with a cup of fragrant wine and smiled as she rubbed his head. No, I'm quite happy. Yes, I'm very happy. I'm so happy that I want to ask you something. Is it really okay for us to walk around in such a dignified manner without hiding anything? Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. In a situation where he was being watched from all sides, he wished that he could fly into the sky and disappear from everyone's sight. Yuan, on the other hand, swaggered into the restaurant with him. Well, it's okay. We'll enjoy ourselves, and they'll find them. As long as no one is blind enough to cause trouble, everything will be fine. It's not too late to run away if something happens. Yuan smiled as she patted his head and said with a smile, Besides, who can recognize you now? Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing's handsome face turned as black as charcoal. He patted the red robe he had temporarily changed into, and his body couldn't help but tremble with shame and anger. That was Yu Yin's robe, and it still had a faint fragrance. The signature clothes of the goddess were a large black windbreaker and a black hat. So before entering the city, Yuan had dressed him up well. He originally looked like a girl, but now he looked like a young girl with a bitter face. His slender hair was pinned into a phoenix crown with a jade hairpin, and a lotus flower was inserted into his hair. When Mei Mao raised her head, it made people's hearts beat faster. Of course, although Yuan said that she was taking him out to have fun, she was actually looking for medicinal herbs and information. The flame flower and the ice crystal were not ordinary materials. The Taiyuan region was unimaginably vast, and it was a complete accident that they were able to find the 10,000 years green spiritual vine. As for the remaining two, it seemed that they couldn't completely rely on their illusory and unreliable luck. After stuffing herself with food and drinks, Yuan burped in satisfaction, then dragged Yun Nuoxing, who had a bitter look on his face, towards the biggest inn in the city. Wait for me. On the street, Yun Nuoxing was panting as he supported Yuan. At this time, he was wearing some high-heeled boots, and he staggered to catch up with Yuan. The shoes on his feet made him feel really uncomfortable, but Yuan seemed to be deliberately walking very fast, making it difficult for him to move. Come on, you look exactly like a delicate girl. It seems that my skills are quite good. Retract your chin a little more. Seeing Yun Nuoxing's embarrassed appearance, Yuan nodded with satisfaction. She reached out to hold Yun Nuoxing's hand and said while holding back her laughter, I can feel you laughing. I can hear you laughing. Yun Nuoxing blushed. He had never seen a man dressed as a woman so well. Okay. After finding a good place to sleep in the hotel, Yuan left Yun Nuoxing in the hotel and went out alone. The latter only had time to remind her to be careful and threw the netherworld ruined sword to her. Then he saw a red whirlwind fly away, leaving a trail of dust behind. The door creaked as it swayed, so energetic that it gives me a headache. Watching Yuan leave, Yun Nuoxing shook his head with a smile. He didn't have that much energy. He sighed and walked to the mirror. Looking at himself in the mirror, he couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. I really look good. Yun Nuoxing lifted the hem of his clothes and turned around. He tried to smile sweetly, but when he saw his face, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. After sitting in the hotel for a long time, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but look at himself in the mirror again. After making sure that even he couldn't recognize himself, he walked straight out. When he arrived at a restaurant, Yun Nuoxing sat down by the window on the second floor as usual. When he heard the exclamations of amazement and admiration, he felt both angry and helpless. At the same time, he praised Yuan in his heart. Places like restaurants were always the best way to obtain information. There were many people, and the flow of information was very fast. Constellation City's auction, which is held once every 100 years, is about to begin. It is said that even the experts of the older generation have been alarmed this time. The 9 great elemental temples, the 8 great ancient families, these colossal forces stationed in the Taiyuan region are about to take action. They have been preparing for this auction for a long time. An auction that spans 100 years. An ordinary person can only participate in it 4 or 5 times in their lifetime. I wonder if this auction will be as intense as the previous one. It is said that there is a mid-level divine weapon in this auction. That is a divine weapon. They are actually willing to put it up for auction. Sigh, a divine weapon can't be used just because you have it. If the divine weapon is not compatible with your element, its power will be damaged. It will be far less powerful than a person with the same element. I guess the people of Constellation Pavilion have some plans, so they put it up for auction. Do you guys think those big shots will come in person? That's not very likely. Those old monsters won't be interested in auctions of this level. They are already giving enough face by sending their subordinate forces to participate. But the Taiyuan goddess is here. She might even come to the Constellation Pavilion's auction. Aren't those 11 forces very interested in her? Goddess, huh? It is said that the heaven-defying senior of the Divination Pavilion forcefully calculated her location and calculated that she would come to Constellation City. I wonder if she really came. What kind of person is she that these 11 transcendental forces are willing to spend so much effort to find her? The 9 great temples said that she looks like an acquaintance, but who knows what they are thinking. They put out a reward for finding her, but the prerequisite is that she can't be harmed. Do they think she is stupid? Just stand there and let you catch her? If it were you, would you do that? Then, can't they seal her and take her away? The goddess has a divine weapon. Even the heaven-defying senior had to use almost all of his strength to calculate her location. That divine weapon must be a top-level one. It might even be a sealing one. What kind of seal do you think can seal her? Moreover, don't forget that she worked with the Glorious tree to eradicate the soul-devouring tree. Now, no one knows her relationship with the Glorious tree. If something happens to her, the Glorious tree will go crazy and unleash its unparalleled power. The 11 forces will be destroyed. Is it that terrifying? The Glorious tree was born from heaven and earth. It is a divine item that has existed for dozens of eras. Who can stop it? Speaking of the Glorious tree, why did it suddenly disappear from the ghost forest? Why didn't it leave even a trace? Heaven and earth treasures have the instinct to take advantage of good fortune and avoid calamity. After living for dozens of eras, it has already given birth to its own spiritual wisdom. Maybe its incarnation has already walked in the fish world. Maybe it felt something and hit its body. Gee, it's really hard for the people of the 9 temples. They used such a large force to find it. But in the end, they didn't even find a hair. Shoo. The people of the Temple of Elements are coming. The sound of flying around in the restaurant came to an abrupt end. Everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding and suddenly fell silent, causing Yin Nuoxing to be startled. He slightly raised his gaze and looked towards the entrance of the restaurant. There was a trace of puzzlement in her eyes. Sister Huiji, what's wrong? Beside him, a woman in green robes with an otherworldly appearance asked with a faint smile. She had a charming look on her face. That person is so strange, the girl called Huiji frowned. She was only 17 or 18 years old, but there was a trace of bone-piercing coldness on her face. She was very different from the fiery impression of Huiji. It seemed that she didn't like to talk much. Hearing this, the other 7 people also turned their eyes suspiciously. When they looked carefully, they were all stunned. Huh? The woman in the green robe and the man in the silver robe both exclaimed softly. Obviously, they both found that something was wrong. The 8 people retracted their gazes and looked at each other. Then, they inexplicably turned their gazes away. When the people in the hall saw this, they also followed their gazes and looked at Yin Nuoxing. They were all curious about what they were looking at. At this time, Yin Nuoxing was still staring out of the window, but his heart was as uneasy as ants on a hot pan. He kept saying, "Oh my God, why are you looking at me? I'm not a peerless beauty. It's useless to look at me." However, he forgot that after being dressed up by Yuan, he really did look like a peerless beauty. Although it was strange, the 8 people didn't do anything. They looked away after a few more glances. They quietly drank their tea and glanced at the empty seat from time to time, as if waiting for someone. Yin Nuoxing quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Although the 8 people still glanced at him from time to time, at least they didn't make trouble for him. However, he wasn't worried that they would do anything to him. After all, the 11 alliances had said that they would find him without any harm. They were the people of the 9 temples. Naturally, they wouldn't trouble him for no reason. The premise was that he had to report his identity. But then he would be caught. After a while, 8 figures came in from the door. They inadvertently glanced at the 8 people of the Temple of Elements. Then, 4 of them didn't change their expressions while the other 4 frowned. The 8 people of the Temple of Elements also glanced at them. 16 pairs of eyes met each other in the air. The sharp people seemed to have smelled the smell of gunpowder. However, to everyone's disappointment, none of the dozen people said anything. The 8 people of the Temple of Elements just looked at them and walked toward the table. They were a little far away from them. Everyone also looked at the 8 people. They didn't find any obvious characteristics, so they retracted their gazes. The information is accurate. There is indeed that thing in this auction. Yin Nuashing didn't know how long he had been sitting. Just as he was about to fall asleep, an amiable voice sounded without warning. He was about to close his eyes when he opened them again. He looked downstairs. "Brother, can you change the way you appear? It's so scary every time." Even a man in the silver-blue robe was startled. His entire body trembled, and then he sighed. He looked at the seat that had been empty for a long time and grumbled. That's right. Nobody knew when a person had appeared on the seat. His snow-white robe didn't seem to be stained with a trace of smoke. His bright white hair was casually draped over his shoulders. His eyebrows were also bright white. His slightly squinted eyes and the corner of his mouth had a faint smile. It gave him a gentle and refined taste. His face could be regarded as delicate and pretty. Although he wasn't the kind of handsome, the more you looked at him, the more you would be fascinated by him. Light element, Yin Nuashing slowly narrowed his eyes as he felt the aura coming out of his body. Chapter 33. Is it confirmed? Is the news wrong? The woman in green took a sip of tea and looked at the man in white. It's confirmed. The Divine King and the others also said that we should try our best to get that thing. Then, if we can't win the bid, can we? The man in the silver-blue robe grinned and said meaningfully, Lei Ming, we're not here to fight this time. Everything depends on strength. The man in white raised his eyebrows and reminded him. Then he said, well, if we can't get it in the end, we can also consider it, but it's not our turn to fight. We'll just stand aside and watch the show. In the end, Big Brother, that's what you were thinking. The man in the silver-blue robe, called Lei Ming, muttered, well, Wood Spirit, did I say something? The man in white took a sip of tea and pretended to be puzzled as he asked the woman in green. I don't want to talk to you. The woman called Wood Spirit rolled her eyes at him, turned her head, and said angrily, however, isn't it a little too early for us to participate in an auction of this level? Even the Divine King and the others are paying attention. Wood Spirit played with a strand of black hair in boredom and said, indeed, it has nothing to do with us. The Divine King just brought us here to broaden our horizons. The man in white smiled. I seem to have heard you say that there's a strange person. Putting down the teacup, the man looked at Huiji and said, look up there. Huiji muttered and pointed to the second floor with her fiery red eyes. Yin Nuashing had never seen them before. The man in white followed her line of sight and stared at Yin Nuashing until she felt a little scared. His silver-white eyes swept over her body inch by inch. After a long time, he said indifferently, very strong. The admiration in his voice made Huiji and the others widen their eyes and look at him in astonishment. They couldn't understand why this big brother of the Light Temple would say that. They had never heard him praise others like this. At least, the 8 of you are no match for him. The man in white said again, if Big Brother fights with that person, what's the result? Huiji frowned, curled her lips, and asked indifferently, I'm not sure, what? The 8 of them were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe it. After a while, Lei Ming opened his dry mouth and said, Big Brother, are you kidding? The light element isn't the strongest either. It depends on who is using it. The white-clothed man narrowed his eyes even more and stared at Yin Nuashing without blinking. A faint golden light flashed through his eyes. After a long while, he shook his head. The 8 of them looked at Yin Nuashing with increasingly strange expressions, muttering inwardly. Clearly, They didn't believe the white-clothed man's words. Could it be that he also had the light element? The white-robed man gently stood up and stared at Yin Nuashing. With a very gentle voice, he said softly, "May I know your name, fellow Taoist?" The people in the hall were confused. They didn't know what this hero of the Light Temple was doing. Did he have a grudge against this person? Yin Nuashing, who had almost fallen asleep, was stunned for a moment. He could tell that the voice was directed at him. After thinking for a while, without turning his face, he said in a hoarse voice, "I'm just a nameless cultivator. It's not worth mentioning." The white-clothed man smiled and personally poured a cup of water. A faint golden light appeared in his hand, enveloping the cup of tea. With a wave of his hand, the golden light sent the cup of tea to the table in front of Yin Nuashing. He said with a smile, "With tea in place of wine, I propose a toast to fellow Taoist." Yin Nuashing frowned, confused. He still didn't turn his face. His hand was hidden in his red robe. He took the cup of tea and drank it in one gulp. After all, he didn't want to cause any trouble, so he had no reason to refuse. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuashing also poured a cup of tea in this posture and threw it back. During this process, Yin Nuashing didn't get up. His body was completely curled up in his red robe. No one could tell whether he was a man or a woman. How arrogant! Lei Ming frowned and was about to flare up, but he was stopped by the white-clothed man. Lei Ming immediately transmitted his voice. "Big brother, he doesn't respect you at all. It's fine. I'm toasting him, but I didn't say that he has to toast me." The white-clothed man shook his head. He still had a warm smile on his face. He took the teacup floating in front of him, raised his head, and drank it in one gulp. "Fellow Taoist, what's outside the window?" The white-clothed man thought for a while and asked in a seemingly casual manner. However, he didn't use a voice transmission to deliberately attract the attention of the surrounding people. "Flowers." Yin Nuashing frowned. He didn't know why the white-clothed man was pestering him. Hearing the extremely cold voice, the white-clothed man shook his head helplessly and sat down. It seemed that the conversation couldn't continue. "Big brother, what are you doing?" Mu Ling transmitted her voice in confusion. "Nothing. I'm very curious about this person's identity. Just treat it as a whim." The white-clothed man smiled silently and explained. The good show that they were looking forward to didn't happen. Everyone shook their heads in disappointment and then went back to talking about their own matters. Yin Nuashing now felt like he was riding a tiger and couldn't get off. He didn't reveal his identity and appearance just now because of his mentality. Of course, he couldn't do it now. He wanted to wait for the people from the 9 great temples to leave before immediately returning. However, they didn't leave even after a long time, as if they wanted to stay here. Motherf asterisk cur, Motherf asterisk cur, Motherf asterisk cur, you bastard, you pervert. Yin Nuashing cursed the white-clothed man in his heart. It had been half a day since then, and his neck was aching. If the latter hadn't casually talked to him, he wouldn't have to turn his neck so sadly. Motherf asterisk cur, grave egg, duck egg, dragon egg. Yin Nuashing gritted his teeth. At the same time, he wailed and begged in his heart, "Big sister Yuin, come save me. I can't hold on any longer." Night fell. The ice-blue crescent moon hung in the sky and poured its cold moonlight onto the earth, causing the temperature of the world to drop slightly. There was a saying that went, "Only appear when you're called out 1,000 times." After crying in his heart for a long time, Yuin finally appeared at the entrance of the tavern as if she had sensed something. When she saw Yin Nuashing on the second floor, she almost screamed. However, when she sensed the strange atmosphere around her, she restrained herself. "Big sister, save me. That pervert has his eyes on me." Yin Nuashing naturally sensed Yin's arrival and immediately transmitted his voice with his soul power. This way, as long as the soul power didn't surpass his, it would be impossible to stop him. After refining the heavenly spirit branch, his soul had also been strengthened to a terrifying extent. Yuin twirled Mei Mao around and glanced at the people from the 9 great temples. Then, she casually walked up to the second floor. When she passed by the table of people from the 9 great temples, The 9 of them glanced at Yuin before retracting their gazes. Yuin stroked the shrunken, netherworld ruined sword that was hidden in her sleeve. When she passed by Yun Nuoxing, the netherworld ruined sword suddenly trembled and emitted a purplish black light. It expanded at an astonishing speed and instantly enveloped a few meters around the two of them. Then, the two of them instantly disappeared without a trace under everyone's astonished gazes. They actually escaped. The white-robed man stared in astonishment. For the first time, his eyes widened. It's a barrier. I sense the fluctuations of a barrier. It's at least an immortal-grade barrier. The woman in the ice-blue robe, who had been silent all this time, spoke in astonishment. She was very sensitive to the activation of barriers and formations. I miscalculated. I didn't expect that girl to be her companion. Forget it. Let's ignore her. Let's go and rest for the night. We'll go to the auction tomorrow. The white-robed man scratched his head and chuckled. The 8 of them rolled their eyes at him. They didn't know what he was up to. However, they didn't say anything. They nodded, got up, and left. The white-robed man sighed and watched the 8 of them leave the restaurant. Then, he got up and walked straight to where Yun Nuoxing was sitting. He lowered his head and looked at the table. His body instantly stiffened. There were 2 big words written on the table. Pervert. Did I do something wrong? The white-robed man shuddered when he sensed the strong resentment in those 2 words. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Shaking his head, his body trembled, and he disappeared on the spot. In the hotel, the space suddenly trembled slightly. A purplish-black barrier slowly appeared and dispersed. Yun Nuoxing and Yu Yin's figures appeared. Damn it! That damned white-robed *TCH. Don't let me see him again. As soon as she came out of the barrier, Yun Nuoxing sat on the bed with a belly full of anger. She hammered the bed unhappily and cursed continuously. Little Star is so angry. Yuin covered her mouth with her lily-white hand. She laughed so hard that her delicate body was trembling. Yun Nuoxing pouted and stared at her resentfully. All right. Let's stop fooling around. I just received information about the flame flower. Yuin smiled and patted her face. Where is it? Yun Nuoxing's spirit was slightly lifted, and he looked at her with shining eyes. The auction. Yun Nuoxing lowered her head when she heard that. She stared at Yuin strangely. It's the once-in-a-century auction in Constellation City. Yuin was stunned when she saw Yun Nuoxing's dazed look. Everyone in the city knows about this. You've been sitting in the restaurant for half a day. You should have heard about it, right? Yun Nuoxing laughed bitterly when he heard that. I know, but why there? I collected some information and went to the auction house on the way. I found traces of the flame flower. Rather than go through the trouble of looking for it myself, I might as well buy it directly. Yuin pursed her lips and raised her chin. What's wrong? Yuin was a little stunned when she saw Yun Nuoxing's liver-colored face. Yun Nuoxing nodded bitterly and told her what happened in the hotel just now. Wait! Yuin suddenly stopped him. She raised her lily-white hand and energy surged. The faces of 8 people appeared, and she asked, the 8 people who came in later. Are they these 8 people? Do you know them? Yun Nuoxing nodded and asked. I don't. Yuin shook her head and said faintly. Do you know where these 8 people came from? Yun Nuoxing shook his head and said, I haven't talked to them before. I don't know. Yuin sighed and said, they are from the 8 ancient families. The people who came this time aren't just the young experts. Some of the elders from their forces came with them. It seems like there's something that they're envious of and want to get their hands on. Little Star, if you're exposed this time, your situation will be very serious. Yu Yin's face was solemn, which was rare for her. Everyone in the world knew that the 11 forces were searching for Yun Nuoxing. Although they didn't know what they were looking for, if they found Yun Nuoxing, she wouldn't be safe. Who knew if they wanted Yun Nuoxing to do something strange? Do you mean that I don't have to go? Yun Nuoxing scratched her head. No, you should go. It's fine, I'll handle everything. Yuin shook her head. Mei Mao looked at her with a sly glint in her eyes. Yun Nuoxing's hair stood on end when she saw that strange glint. She folded her red clothes with both hands and laughed dryly. She asked weakly, what do you mean? Yuin grinned. Her 10 fingers moved, and a light flashed from her ring. A bunch of strange boxes suddenly flew out, and 2 brushes appeared in her hands. She held them in her hands and waved them at Yin Nuo Xing. She smiled evilly and said, "Little Xing Xing, give me your beautiful face." No. Deep in the night, a shrill scream sounded. Her skin is like congealed fat, sparkling and translucent. Her limpid eyes are divine, and her bones are jade-like. She is devastatingly beautiful and peerless in her generation. What an outstanding beauty. She can captivate the birds and beasts. She can outshine the moon and put the flowers to shame. Yin Nuoxing opened her eyes and was stunned when she heard this description. The divine mirror of light appeared in her hand, and she looked into it in fear. Her long and narrow eyelashes trembled slightly, and her long and slender eyebrows curved into a beautiful arc. Her lips were red and her teeth were white. Her eyes were a little blurred, and her ink-black hair was casually tied up by a fiery red long belt. Her every movement exuded a seductive aura. She was a girl who could bring disaster to a country. No, this isn't me. It's not me. Yin Nuoxing was so frightened by this perfect face that her face turned pale. She looked up at the sky and screamed in horror. Ah! Yuan rolled on the bed and laughed. Her jade-like hands kept hammering the mattress. That little star? You can stay like this from now on. Yuan laughed, and her eyes were like water. She smiled and said, "I think this haha is pretty good. Why don't you stay as a girl, a haha, and live on?" No, 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 this isn't real. Tell me that this is a dream. Yin Nuoxing screamed shrilly and almost dropped the mirror. Chapter 34. After a long time, Yin Nuoxing, who had gradually calmed down, sighed and looked at himself in the mirror on the dressing table. Then he looked at Yuan, who was standing behind him and gently combing his hair, and said, "We're going to the auction, but we don't have that much money." Although he had once looted Mu Yingzi's palace, there wasn't much money left behind among the things left. Most of them were strange things, and there were only about 200 million gold coins left. For an ordinary family, it wasn't a problem to support hundreds of generations of people for hundreds of lifetimes, and it was even a huge sum of money for some ordinary cultivators. However, if they wanted to participate in an auction, the luxurious bidding was still not enough. Money isn't a problem. Yuan waved her hand and picked up a jade hairpin to measure it on his head. "You have a way?" Yin Nuoxing was puzzled. Yuan smiled mysteriously and put down the jade hairpin. Then she took out a dark green leaf from her ring, and a rich vitality suddenly filled the entire room. This! Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. He recognized that this was the leaf of the Glories Will tree. That majestic vitality couldn't be wrong. He looked at the leaf and then looked at the crafty Yuan. He suddenly had a headache and guessed some clues. "Really, do we have to do this?" Yin Nuoxing swallowed his saliva. This was the leaf of the Glories Will tree. Although he had hundreds of them on him, to the outside world, it was an unattainable divine object. "Anyway, you have a lot of them, so don't make a fuss." Yuan pursed her lips disapprovingly. She pressed his head, picked up a jade hairpin, and ran it through his hair a few times, making a noble phoenix hairpin. Then she patted his head in satisfaction. "That thing, once it is born, there will be a bloodbath." Yin Nuoxing's cheeks trembled. Those big forces were like wolves and tigers. A few months ago, they had obtained nothing in the Ghost Chi forest. Now, if they saw this palm-sized leaf, their eyes would probably turn green and they would fight for it crazily. In a battle between several tigers, there would definitely be casualties. Who cares? Let the outside world fight until the sky turns dark and the earth turns dark. Let's see if the world collapses. We just need to take the things and leave. Yuan stuck out her tongue and smiled cutely. Also, from tomorrow onwards, you're not allowed to slap people anymore. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. "You can't even roll your eyes." Yuan pinched his face and continued. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head. "Tilting your head is fine, but widen your eyes. If it's too big, it's too small. It's better to be natural. Spare me. Why do you have to do this?" Yin Nuoxing wailed. Being treated like this by a girl made him want to die. The Constellation Pavilion was an extremely famous big force in the entire Taiyuan region. In the realm of the gods, it was known as the 12 Constellation Palaces along with the other star forces. Constellation City was a city controlled by the Constellation Pavilion. Although their headquarters were in the Divine Prefecture, their strength in the Taiyuan region branch was not something that other ordinary forces could compare to. Therefore, when the Constellation Pavilion announced that they were going to hold an auction, many big and small forces came to show their support. However, this was a large-scale auction that was held once in 100 years. Most people hoped to buy something they liked, needed, or saw something that was rarely seen in the outside world. The night quietly passed as the first rays of the morning sun appeared on the horizon. Star City, which had slept for an entire night, instantly erupted with shocking vitality. The desolate streets were swiftly filled with human figures that surged out from various places. The destination of these human figures was the same. That was the auction square in the middle of the city. Today was the grandest large-scale auction in Constellation City in 100 years. The number of experts who came for it also surpassed that of any previous auction. Its influence even spread throughout the entire western region of the Taiyuan region. A ray of morning sun spread through the window and climbed into the room, shining on the red-clothed girl who was kneeling on the bed. Under the rays of the sun, the red-clothed girl's tightly shut Maimao trembled slightly and struggled to open her eyes. Her pitch-black eyes flickered with a faint golden radiance. Yun Nuoxing suddenly spread her 6 pitch-black wings, and violent wind elements filled every corner of the room. After a while, it calmed down, and the 6 wings also slowly retracted. As the violent wind calmed down, her fluttering dress also quietly fell down and stuck to her skin. Touching her well-decorated face, Yun Nuoxing sighed and jumped off the bed. She woke up Yuan, who was lying on the other bed behind her, and tidied herself up in front of the mirror. Yuan woke up in a daze. She rubbed her sleepy eyes, washed up a little, and smiled. "Good morning, great beauty, Yun." Then, she was dragged out of the hotel by Yun Nuoxing with a dark face. The location of the auction held by the Constellation Pavilion was an unusually spacious palace located at the center of Constellation City. Although the spatial array had filled the entire place with people, there was still an endless stream of people flowing in. When Yun Nuoxing and the other 2 arrived at the auction palace, they looked at the seemingly endless stream of people and immediately felt a headache coming on. These crazy people. However, when Yun Nuoxing activated the plane barrier of the Nether Void Sword, the surrounding figures were instantly swept away. Although the Constellation Pavilion had special passageways for powerful experts and major factions, the 2 of them were not among them. However, it was no big deal to use a plane barrier to pass through. After all, no one would know. The 2 of them first came to the auction appraisal room. In front of the dozens of pairs of shining eyes in the appraisal room, they calmly took out a jade box, revealing the heavenly spirit tree leaf inside. Then, they gently retreated from the pile of jaws that fell to the ground. When they left, they were also given a palm-sized silver VIP jade talisman that flickered with starlight. When they returned to the passageway outside, they inadvertently saw a large group of people coming in through the special passageway. "The people from a 9-element shrine are all here," Yun Nuoxing whispered. There were a few people who looked quite young, but their eyes revealed the vicissitudes of life. They were dressed according to the colors of each shrine. The only difference was that the man in white clothes seemed to be the only one from the light shrine. "Who is it?" The leader of the silver-blue strong figure suddenly raised his head, and a tiny bolt of lightning shot out from his silver eyes. It instantly passed through the place where Yun Nuoxing and the others were. Just as it was about to hit the wall, he frowned and dissipated the bolt of lightning. "Brother Lei, what's wrong?" The group of people looked at him in confusion, then looked at the empty area and asked in confusion. The strong man frowned and said uncertainly, "I clearly felt that someone was spying on us just now. Could it be that I sensed wrongly?" After saying that, he shook his head and complained that he was getting old, Everyone looked at each other and felt a little puzzled, but they didn't pay too much attention to it and walked straight into the passageway. If you can break the enchantment set up by the Netherworld Ruin Sword, then you're really heaven-defying. On the other side, Yun Nuoxing, who was slowly walking into the VIP passageway, smiled faintly. Yun Nuoxing and Lei Yuan walked through the soft passageway. After a few minutes, the view in front of them suddenly became spacious, and a huge auction house appeared in front of them. Without leaving a trace, Yun Nuoxing dispersed the barrier and looked at the auction venue that was densely packed with countless seats. He could not help but stick out his tongue. This was the first time in his life that he had seen so many people gathered together. The noise was enough to shatter his eardrums. At this time, the huge auction house was already filled with many people. There were also dozens of transparent platforms floating in the air, and all of them were filled with people. All kinds of voices were intertwined, and it sounded very noisy. Looking at the ceiling that was only supported by 4 pitch-black pillars, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but exclaim, "Instead of saying that this is a palace, it's better to say that this is a square." The entire palace was about 3,000 feet tall, and even the 4 pillars were a few hundred feet wide, exuding a faint coldness. From the outside, the palace didn't look so huge. According to Yun Nuoxing's guess, there was probably some kind of space-expanding array that was activated here. As soon as the two of them walked out of the passageway, a pretty, dignified maiden of Chong Sam quickly greeted them and said respectfully, "Sirs, do you have a VIP jade talisman?" Yun Nuoxing took out the jade talisman that a group of appraisers had just stuffed into his hand from his pocket and handed it over. After receiving the jade talisman, the respectful expression on the maid's face became even more obvious. She respectfully bowed to the two of them and said, "Sirs, please follow me." After saying that, she directly rose into the air and slowly flew towards the sky. Behind her, Yun Nuoxing looked at each other and followed her. The two of them followed the maid and passed through 2 layers of transparent platforms in the sky. A minute later, they stopped in front of a floating platform that was closest to the front row of the auction house, after which they bowed and retreated. This floating platform was like a small, luxurious room. It was exquisitely designed and appeared exceptionally luxurious. When they walked in, the various noises below were immediately isolated. When they looked down, the view was excellent, and they could see every inch of the auction house. They were only about 10 meters above the ground. The two of them sat in the VIP seats. Yun Nuoxing lazily shrank into the soft chair and looked at the other 9 VIP seats. At this moment, there were already quite a number of people seated or standing in the VIP seats. The appearance of the Yun Nuoxing duo also attracted quite a number of gazes, especially the two's stunning faces, which attracted the attention of quite a number of young men. 9 elemental temple, 8 ancient families. Yun Nuoxing silently read the names of the forces in the VIP seats and softly exclaimed, "What's the matter?" Yuan asked. "Those 3. In her line of sight, a fiery red figure, a sturdy silver-blue figure, and a purple-golden-robed man were standing together. They were laughing and chatting about something. The 3 of them were the 3 people she met in the ancient ruins outside Star Spirit City. They were from the Fire Divine Temple, the Lightning Divine Temple, and the Xian family. At the same time, the 3 people who sensed Yun Nuoxing's gaze also looked over. When they saw Yun Nuoxing, they were stunned. However, they couldn't see anything and lowered their gazes again. Ayaya, little star won't be recognized. Believe in Big Sister's skills. Yuan waved her hand indifferently after hearing Yun Nuoxing's words. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. They had already been tormented to this extent. What else could she do if she didn't believe in her? Yun Nuoxing closed her eyes and began to rest, waiting for the auction to begin. After Yun Nuoxing closed her eyes, a steady stream of people continued to pour in. Half an hour later, almost all the seats were taken. The 10 VIP seats were also filled with people. I'm very curious. What exactly is attracting these experts? His soul power quietly withdrew from the void. Other than the 9 divine temples and the 8 ancient families, he didn't know anything else. Among them, he heard the most about the news that the goddess of Taiyuan would come to this auction. He didn't know who the so-called heaven-defying senior of the Divine Mystery Pavilion was. To be able to calculate his journey and the Netherworld Ruin Sword could shield him from the Divine Mystery Pavilion. This person was also incredible. He could even break the protection of the Divine Sword records, number 1 Divine Sword. While Yun Nuoxing closed his eyes, a clear chime of a bell suddenly rang out from the center of the auction hall. It swayed and reverberated in the palace, suppressing the clamor. The bell slowly stopped ringing. In the palace, 4 huge pillars shot out 3 rays of light, connecting each pillar and forming an energy barrier. It was like a 4-sided world that sealed the auction stage. This was a protective measure. Although it was impossible for the people who came to this auction to behave atrociously, it was just a precaution. It was to prevent people who didn't have eyes from rushing up to snatch the auction items. Looking at the energy barrier that descended from the sky, Yun Nuoxing slowly opened her eyes and exhaled. The show had begun. Chapter 35. As the energy barrier extended to the sky, the ground of the auction stage slowly cracked open, and a floating platform slowly rose from the ground, appearing in front of countless people's eyes. A man wearing a black robe embellished with faint silver light walked out with a warm smile on his face. As soon as this person appeared, a majestic aura slowly swept out from his body, causing the entire area to quiet down. The pavilion master of the Constellation Pavilion. Yun Nuoxing asked in a low voice as she narrowed her eyes and looked at the man wearing a starry robe. Although the man looked quite young, the vicissitudes of life in his eyes and the aura of age that permeated his body showed that this person was not as young as he looked. Perhaps he was an old monster who had lived for an unknown number of years. Of course not. Yun shook her head. Although this man was very strong, it did not mean that he was the pavilion master of the Constellation Pavilion. The headquarters of the Constellation Pavilion was in the Divine Prefecture, and it was only a branch in the Sourcepeak region. It was impossible for the pavilion master to make a special trip to this place for a small auction. If there was some shocking divine object to be auctioned, it should be hosted in the Divine Prefecture. That place was the center of the Divine Realm, and it was far more popular than the Sourcepeak region. It could attract countless people. Perhaps he is only the pavilion master of the Sourcepeak region branch. Yuan said, if the pavilion master of the Constellation Pavilion personally came to host the auction, the people who came would not just be some representatives, but the true master of the force. The Constellation Pavilion was a first-rate force in the Divine Realm, and many people would give them some face when hosting an auction. Ah, this old man is the pavilion master of the Constellation Pavilion Sourcepeak region branch, Xingju. I believe that many people know me. Today, my Constellation Pavilion branch is hosting an auction, and this old man would like to thank everyone for coming. The gaze of the man who showed up paused at a certain spot, and his faint laughter echoed in the ears of everyone present. However, it was somewhat strange for a young man to refer to himself as an old man. It seemed that this young man should be an old monster who had lived for who knows how many years. His cultivation had reached an unfathomable level, and his lifespan had reached a certain extent. Xingju's words caused some forces in the VIP seats to laugh. The Constellation Pavilion could be considered as a first-rate force in the divine world. They had a wide range of connections and had stood tall for many years. The pavilion master of the Constellation Pavilion was a prominent figure in the world of cultivation. He had roamed the continent for many years and had made many friends. Many of the people present had some kind of friendship with him, especially the 9 great elemental temples and the 8 great ancient families. Even if they didn't come to participate in the auction, they would still come to support. Haha, I can't be bothered to say any more nonsense. Next, please enjoy the visual feast that my Constellation Pavilion has brought. Xingju greeted some people before cupping his hands together in all directions and speaking with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, the floor of the auction stage split open again, and a few small floating platforms appeared. Xingju also slowly disappeared from where he was standing. A white-haired old man appeared in front of everyone with a smile on his face. Behind him, a group of beautiful maids and servants were shuttling back and forth on the stage, respectfully placing the golden plates in their hands on the auction stage. Yin Nuoxing looked down from above and could see that each of the golden plates contained some objects that were flickering with resplendent light. It was impossible to see what was inside. Next up is the appetizer of our auction, a defensive formation scroll. The white-haired old man smiled and pointed at a golden plate in front of him. A brown scroll was floating on top of the golden plate. It's an earth-based defensive formation. It's at the immortal grade. Defensive formations have always been rare, especially those at the immortal grade. Although it requires elements, it can provide a strong defense in battle. It can also be used to break formations. I'm sure everyone knows how difficult it is to deal with a killing formation cast by a formation master. The white-haired old man said with a smile as he picked up the scroll and weighed it in his hand. As it's the first item, this scroll, which is originally worth 1 million, will be auctioned at 300,000 gold coins. The maximum bid will be 2 million. The first person to bid this price will have it. Everyone, you can't miss such an opportunity. The white-haired old man rubbed the scroll, and a bright light flashed across his old eyes. This was just a small trick, but the atmosphere in the auction hall was instantly heated up. 300,000 gold coins was not a sky-high price for most of the people present. Furthermore, formations were rare to begin with. Only a formation master could cast a formation as he wished. Especially a defensive formation, the price would definitely be much higher than 300,000 gold coins. Therefore, when they heard the old man's words, the price rose and fell, and it instantly exploded in the huge palace. Hearing the surrounding bids, Yin Nuoxing smiled and shook his head. It was too early for them to participate in an auction of this level with their level of cultivation. Speaking of formations, Yin Nuoxing rubbed the pendant and the ring on his left hand. He remembered that there were countless scrolls in the pile of things that Mu Ingzi gave him, right? There did not seem to be any divine-level formations among them. If the outside world knew about the things collected here, they would definitely go crazy. Yin Nuoxing shuddered. He suddenly felt that the ring on his hand was very hot. It seems like it's time to learn these things. The world is so big. It's not good if I don't have a few life-saving methods. He sighed and slowly cast his gaze back to the auction hall. However, he was thinking about how to deal with those things in his heart. Yin Nuoxing's body lazily leaned against the soft chair. He narrowed his eyes slightly. It was not the climax yet. The real show was yet to come. These things were not very attractive to Yin Nuoxing and the people in the VIP seats. After all, no one in the VIP seats had made a bid yet. On the other hand, Yu Yin's eyes were twinkling like stars. She looked like she was in a daze. Yin Nuoxing stuck out his tongue and gently tugged at the corner of her clothes. He transmitted his voice to her. Be more reserved. Yu Yin rolled her eyes at him. She imitated him and lay back on the chair. She knew that this fellow had many treasures on him. After all, he had once entered the ruins of a god. It was normal that these things were not attractive to him. The bidding continued for about 10 minutes while the two of them watched, as if they were watching a show. At that moment, the price of 300,000 had been capped at 2 million. The white-haired old man smiled as he watched the auction hall gradually settle down. 2 million had already exceeded the value of this formation. Under the temptation of a low price, he had reaped a small harvest. The golden hammer in his hand slammed lightly on the stage. Then, the formation scroll was successfully auctioned off. With this good start, the atmosphere in the auction hall was gradually pushed to the climax. Taking advantage of this enthusiasm, the white-haired old man continued to bring out other auction items. With the high quality of the auction items and the old man's provocative flattery, they all sold for a good price. It seemed that the Constellation Pavilion would make a lot of money this time. However, it had to be said that it was not a coincidence that the auction held by the Constellation Pavilion this time attracted so many people. It could be seen from the quality of the auction items that were rarely seen in the outside world. If Yin Nuashing had not moved all of Muingzi's belongings and was used to seeing shocking items, his performance would probably not be much calmer than Yu Yin's. Of course, apart from these reasons, this kind of rare item was the most precious he had ever seen. However, these were all seen from the eyes of the public. The items that were worthy of the attention of the people in the VIP seats had yet to appear. As time passed, the atmosphere in the auction gradually rose. 2 hours had passed, and the quality of the items being auctioned became higher and higher. The atmosphere also became more and more lively. When the time reached 3 hours, some of the items that had appeared could already make the experts in the VIP seats bid for them. Yin Nuashing was a little tempted when he saw some of them. However, after considering for a while, he gave up and did not bid. Those items were not to the point where he had to buy them. A water, elemental, immortal grade, celestial artifact. The starting price is 3 million. Everyone knows that the condensation and tempering of a celestial artifact is much harder than the forging of a weapon. Moreover, a celestial artifact is much more powerful than a weapon of the same level. This is the natal celestial artifact of an expert whose cultivation has reached the peak of the immortal grade. It has a strange effect on restraining the fire element. The old man lightly knocked on the golden plate. On the long golden plate, there was a blue magic staff that was 5 feet long. Rich water elements lingered around the golden plate, and there was even a layer of water on the golden plate. The blue pearl at the top of the staff seemed to have water flowing around it. 4 million! Almost as soon as the old man's voice fell, someone rushed to bid. This caused everyone present to be stunned for a moment. Then, they instantly reacted and revealed an ominous glint in their eyes. 4,500,000. 6 million. The sudden increase of 1,500,000 caused the expressions of everyone present to change. From the looks of it, it was obvious that this person was determined to win. Moreover, it came from the VIP seats. This situation was a little difficult to predict. 10 million. However, this price was quickly pushed down by someone who also came from the VIP seats. Moreover, this person increased the price by 4 million in one go. This boldness caused everyone's expressions to change slightly. With these heavyweights in the VIP seats interfering, the atmosphere in the auction room reached a new level of excitement. The forces participating in this auction came from all over the world. Among them, there were some forces that didn't see eye to eye with each other. If they fought, they would certainly go all out, wishing they could go bankrupt to crush the other party. That ferocious aura made everyone inwardly speechless. They were worthy of being the famous major forces of the Sourcepeak region. They were so rich and overbearing, and they treated money like dirt. They were far from being comparable to ordinary people. And seeing those red-eyed people fighting over the item, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but be startled. Did they come here to quarrel or to buy something? She smiled and shook her head. Her body lazily leaned against the back of the chair, and the teacup in her hand gently swayed, causing ripples to appear in the tea. Just as Yin Nuashing was about to fall asleep, the white-haired old man on the auction stage auctioned off a weapon that was infinitely close to the divine rank. Then, he took the golden plate from the hands of a maid beside him. With a wave of his hand, the golden radiance dissipated, and a fiery red box was taken out. The blazing temperature caused the air to become a little drier. Ha ha! Everyone, the next item to be auctioned is an extremely rare medicinal ingredient, because it grows in an extremely harsh environment, in the depths of magma. However, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. This medicinal ingredient has also undergone some strange mutations. Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Yin Nuashing and Yuyin, who were lazily lying on their chairs, became spirited. Their gazes were filled with interest as they looked towards the auction stage for the first time. Chapter 36. The old man gently opened the box, revealing the flowing magma inside. Above the magma, there was a bewitching flower that was half fiery red and half ice blue. Everyone, this flower is a variant of the flame flower, the ice spirit flame flower. It combines the purest fire and water elements. If it is refined by someone who possesses the fire or water elements, the elements in their body will mutate. Perhaps they will be able to step into the realm of possessing both the fire and water elements. Yin Nuashing immediately perked up when he heard the old man's first sentence. Wasn't he waiting for the flame flower to appear after waiting for so long? However, when he finished listening to the entire story, the excitement that had just surged up in his heart instantly turned into a daze. Huh? Mutated? Half fire and half ice? Yin Nuashing stared blankly at the bewitching flower and was instantly stunned. After waiting for so long, he finally got what he wanted, but it was a mutated one? How could he accept this? I'm not sure about this either. The information that was sent out back then did mention the flame flower, but I didn't expect it to be a mutated one. Ying couldn't help but mutter when she saw Yin Nuashing looking at her in shock. She didn't expect this outcome either. It's okay. It doesn't mean that it can't be used even if it's mutated. Perhaps the effect will be even better. Yin patted his hand and comforted him. No, but this, Yin Nuashing opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he couldn't squeeze out a few words after a long time. His inexplicable emotions finally turned into a helpless sigh. Yin Nuashing looked helplessly at the VIP area. Those people were all excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. It wasn't that the ice spirit flame flower itself was very attractive to them. What really attracted them was the ability to mutate the elements and create two elements. Generally speaking, an ordinary person could only have one element in their body. After all, there was some repulsion between the various elements. For example, metal restrained wood, wood restrained earth, earth restrained water, water restrained fire, and fire restrained metal. It was very difficult for an individual to achieve a complete fusion of all the elements. Moreover, people with multiple elements in their bodies were much stronger than people with only one element in terms of strength and cultivation speed. It was actually very simple to incorporate new elements into one's body. The difficult part was to combine the two elements and refine them to repel each other. However, the inner body was the weakest part of the human body. If an explosion occurred in such a weak place, one would be refined into ashes if one was not careful. Although it was difficult, there were still some people who succeeded in fusing one element and stepped into the realm of dual elements. Those who had such strength had all become giants in the world of cultivation. However, the simplest and most crude method was too dangerous. Not everyone was willing to risk their lives for it. Of course, other than this dangerous method, there was another way. For example, using natural oddities. Needless to say, using this ice spirit flame flower to create a second element in one's body was much safer than directly storing it in one's body. Although it was only limited to water and fire elements, the success rate was not 100%. It was said that the success rate of this method was less than 5%. In other words, even if one refined this ice spirit flame flower, there was only a 5% chance of creating two elements in one's body. The starting price of this ice spirit flame flower is set at 30 million. Each time it increases. The white-haired elder heard the whispers around him and saw the heated gazes. He could not help but laugh. However, before the elder could finish speaking, the people from the Fire God Temple slammed the table and shouted, "The Fire God Temple bids 35 million. The chief family bids 40 million. In the VIP seats, a black-clothed man from the 8 great ancient families also stood up. He looked at the Fire God Temple's side and said fiercely. When the people in the auction house heard the two of them raise the price by 10 million each, they were dumbfounded. Then they were secretly speechless. As expected of a major force, their boldness was unparalleled. The Star Palace bids 43 million. On the other side of the VIP seats, the leading lady in a black robe also gently opened her red lips and slowly spoke. While the major forces were bidding, Yin tugged at the corner of Yin Nuashing's clothes and asked softly, "Little star, how much money do you have on you?" "Only 200 million. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. She did not expect them to be so crazy as to raise the price by millions without even blinking. However, this kind of heavenly treasure that could increase a new element in one's body was a priceless treasure to the major forces. Money was nothing to them. They could just earn more if they lost it. 60 million. The middle-aged man in the ice-blue robe from the water god temple slowly stood up. His blue eyebrows twitched as his calm voice reverberated in the area like thunder. After being fiercely suppressed, the black-clothed man from the Chi family staggered. He narrowed his eyes and said fiercely, 64 million, 75 million. The sudden shout drowned out the voice of the Chi family. Hearing this voice that was like the sound of nature, everyone curiously turned their gazes to the VIP seats. There, Yin Nuashing gently stood up. It's her. The white-clothed man from the light god temple suddenly stopped smiling and muttered softly, Yaohua, do you know her? Almost instantly, the people from the light god temple turned their heads to him and asked hurriedly, I don't know her, but I recognized her. Yaohua shook his head and told them what happened in the restaurant yesterday. Don't provoke her in the future. The middle-aged man from the water god temple frowned and said in a heavy voice, Big brother, she seems to have a problem with you. Lei Ming shrunk his neck and looked at Yin Nuashing before looking at Yaohua. Everyone was surprised and looked over. As expected, they saw Yin Nuashing frowning and Mei Mao glaring at Yaohua. She looked as if she wanted to skin him alive. Did I do something wrong? Yaohua smiled embarrassedly and looked away unnaturally. Hearing this, the young heroes of the Nine God Temple rolled their eyes at him. This woman should have something on her that can block detection. I haven't been able to see through it. The beautiful woman from the Wood God Temple looked away and shook her head. However, this child should have the wood element in her body. I can sense traces of rich vitality fluctuations. Phew! Hearing that it was the wood element, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. If it was only the wood element, it would be better. She had a magic tool that could block the detection of the light god temple elders. The wood element's initial attack power was very low and couldn't play much of a role. It was only useful in healing, but its defensive power was very strong. What's with your expressions? The beautiful woman saw them all breathe a sigh of relief and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Oomph. Seeing that Yaohua looked away, Yun Nuashing snorted and closed Mei Mao's eyes to wait for the next round of bidding. He knew that they wouldn't give up so quickly. Sure enough, not long after he thought about it, the middle-aged man from the Water God Temple stood up and said in a deep voice, 80 million, 90 million. Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, seeing that she was determined to win. This time, it was the people from the Nine God Temple's turn to be surprised. Since she was the wood element, this ice spirit flame flower shouldn't have any effect on her, right? Child, this ice spirit flame flower has no effect on wood element cultivators. Why don't you give it up? You will be satisfied with the reward. The beautiful woman from the Wood God Temple thought for a moment and secretly transmitted her voice to Yun Nuashing. Her voice was gentle and didn't have a trace of tyranny. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing was a little surprised. He didn't expect the beautiful woman to be able to sense the wood element on his body. He turned his eyes and transmitted his voice with some anticipation. Then, do you have a high-level disguise technique? In any case, he was aiming for the disguise technique. No matter how he obtained it, there wouldn't be a problem. If they had it, it would be for the best. It would save him the effort of refining it. The beautiful woman was stunned and quickly told the others. Everyone thought for a moment, but all of them shook their heads. Then, I'm sorry. I also need this ice spirit flame flower. Seeing that they all shook their heads, Yun Nuashing knew that it was hopeless. He transmitted his voice with a trace of apology. The beautiful woman sighed and shook her head helplessly. The people from the Chi family gritted their teeth and looked back at the 7 families who shook their heads. They sat down angrily. They were aiming for that thing. There was no need to stake everything on one throw and go bankrupt. Although the ice spirit flame flower was rare, it wasn't a must. If they couldn't control the dual elements well, it would affect their previous cultivation. In fact, it was just a gamble. The gains didn't make up for the losses. However, the price of this flower wasn't too expensive for them. It was just a matter of whether it was worth it or not. The red-haired young man from the fire god temple also looked at the other 8 people. They also shook their heads vigorously, indicating that it wasn't necessary. The red-haired young man nodded. He also knew that now wasn't the time to go all out. He looked deeply at Yin Nuoxing and slowly sat down. Everyone was a little sluggish. What kind of monster was this young and beautiful girl who suddenly appeared? Even the 9 great elemental temples and the 8 ancient families gave up competing with her. 91 million. Just when everyone thought that the bidding was about to end, a voice slowly came from the VIP seats that had been silent. The old man didn't seem to want to give up so easily. Yin Nuoxing frowned. He was determined to get the ice spirit flame flower. It was fine if he didn't have money. Being able to live freely was his nature. Now, because of a missing person notice, he couldn't eat or sleep in peace and felt uncomfortable all over. It made him feel like he had aged a few decades in an instant. 100 million. Taking a deep breath, Yin Nuoxing's calm voice slowly spread throughout the whole place. Everyone was so scared that they couldn't help but shut their mouths. 100 million wasn't a lot, but he didn't even blink his eyes. Wasn't this 2F** king extravagant? It wasn't worth it at all. Yin Nuoxing knew that it was meaningless to delay the bidding bit by bit. If she wanted to bid a price that others wouldn't dare to follow, she would use her momentum to suppress others. The old man frowned. Seeing her desperately increasing the price as usual, he wanted to follow her fiercely, but he was pulled back by the people behind him. It wasn't worth it to compete with an unknown person. Moreover, this wasn't their goal. The old man also came to his senses. He glanced at Yin Nuoxing with a sinister gaze. In the end, he swung his sleeves angrily and sat down. Hee, is there anyone else who wants to increase the price? The white-haired old man smiled as he looked at the whole place. 100 million. The ice spirit flame flower's value wasn't worth this price. It could be said that he was going to make a huge profit this time. Asking this question was just a routine. The white-haired old man's words echoed in the auction. After a while, no one said anything. From the few times that Yin Nuoxing increased the price, he was determined to win. Moreover, even the big forces in the VIP seats had given up on bidding. Naturally, they wouldn't offend an unknown person. The quiet atmosphere in the auction house lasted for half a minute. The white-haired old man shook his head helplessly and gently slammed the golden hammer in his hand. This price was already considered not bad. Speaking of which, he was a little greedy. As the hammer slammed down, Yin Nuoxing heaved a huge sigh of relief. He had obtained the second material, but, damn it, I used up half of my fortune in one go. Seeing the old man slam the hammer down, Yin Nuoxing immediately cursed in his heart. Although he had all of Muingzi's fortune on him, and any item he took out was more valuable than this ice spirit flame flower, he didn't plan to take it out yet. Chapter 37. As time passed, the atmosphere in the auction house became increasingly heated. The items that appeared from time to time could already be considered to be of high quality, and any one of them could cause a sensation in the outside world. In the face of such a sky-high price bidding, ordinary people would just sit back and watch a good show. If they could see the major forces in the VIP seats fighting over an item, they would not have come in vain. Ever since Yin Nuoxing bought the ice spirit flame flower, he had basically quieted down. During this period, although he saw many rare medicinal herbs, elixirs, and various array diagrams, he also had a lot of them in his inventory. Therefore, he was only moved for a while and did not stand up to bid. As wave after wave of dazzling auction items were placed on display, even Yin Nuoxing could not help but be surprised by the abundance of the Constellation Pavilion's inventory. During this auction, even he was a little moved by some of the auction items. However, after thinking for a while, he still did not stand up to bid. His biggest wish was to be able to buy a piece of facial skin or a high-level disguise technique at the auction. This would save him the effort of running around to find the snow crystal. As the number of times he appeared increased, he would be recognized sooner or later. Since he had already agreed with Yuan that he would not be an ascetic monk, there was no reason for him to live in the mountains and forests all day long. Since that was the case, he had to find a way to change his appearance. After all, he could not always appear as a girl named Yu Xi. After all, he was still a man. Yin Nuashing had a good idea, but unfortunately, things did not go according to his wishes. There seemed to be very few disguise techniques. They had searched through several cities, but did not find anything. It seemed that there was nothing here either. Moreover, he had waited for so long and did not see the snow crystal appear. This made his plan to gather all the materials in one go to waste. However, it was understandable after thinking about it. The rarity of the snow crystal was not much lower than the ice spirit flame flower. It was also the crystallization of a mixture of elements. It was the dual elements of water and earth. Such a divine item naturally would not be piled up together like cabbages for him to choose from. Therefore, when the auction was nearing its end, Yin Nuashing still did not get what he wanted. He sighed softly. Don't worry. There are 3 herbs and 1 snow crystal stone. You will find it sooner or later. Maybe before you find the snow crystal stone, an appearance-changing technique will come to you. Yuan rubbed his head and heard his soft sigh. She knew what he was thinking and softly consoled him. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. She dispersed the anticipation in her heart and looked at the auction stage in boredom. At this moment, the auction was nearing its end, so the auction items that appeared at this time were all important items. For example, the item being auctioned now was a divine rank magic tool, but it could barely enter the mid-divine rank. Generally speaking, the value of a magic tool was slightly higher than a profound art secret manual. For example, this flag had already been flipped to a price of 1 billion by several large forces, and there was no sign of it stopping. However, once a divine rank magic tool was taken out for auction, it meant that the spirit contained within the magic tool had been removed or sealed. If this was not done, a divine rank magic tool with its own consciousness would not easily change owners. However, this would severely damage the magic tool's power, and even its spirituality would decrease. Therefore, this mid-divine rank magic tool could at most be considered to have the strength of a beginner divine rank magic tool. Although it could be repaired, it would definitely not return to its peak. After all, spirituality was the root. If the root was destroyed, how could it grow? Yin Nuashing had no interest in this mid-divine rank magic tool. He had 3 undamaged high divine rank magic tools. If he included the damaged Netherworld Ruin Sword, he had 4. Any one of them could cause the realm of the gods to collapse. Moreover, he had a lot of them in his pendant. However, the Netherworld Ruin Sword spirit root is completely broken, and its consciousness has been destroyed. The spirit inside is probably no longer around. Although Senior Mu Ingzi repaired it and reconnected most of the broken spirit root, the actual repair is less than 1/10,000th. Yin Nuashing rubbed the pattern on the Netherworld Ruin Sword on his right forearm and couldn't help but sigh. It was already a miracle that it still had its own consciousness. Looks like besides finding out my origins, I have to find a way to repair the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Yin Nuashing remembered that day when the Netherworld Ruin Sword swept across dozens of mountain ranges and flipped them over. This was only the incomplete power. He didn't know how terrifying it would be when it was restored to its peak. Perhaps it could even slice the world apart with a single slash? Thinking of this, Yin Nuashing thought of the strange jade fragment that had fused with the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Since then, there had been no movement. It seemed that the two had merged into one. Moreover, the Netherworld Ruin Sword spirituality seemed to have increased significantly. Netherworld Ruin, what do those white jade fragments have to do with you? Yin Nuashing asked as he summoned the Netherworld Ruin Sword and gently rubbed it with his fingers. Buzz! The Netherworld Ruin Sword trembled, indicating that it did, but it wasn't very clear. Yin Nuashing sighed and nodded, putting the Netherworld Ruin Sword away. Looks like I have to go somewhere else. Yin Nuashing sighed softly in his heart and clenched his fists. Even if it was for the sake of his origins, he couldn't stay in the Taiyuan region forever. However, before he left the stage of the Taiyuan region. He had to take a good look around first. After making some plans in his heart, Yun Nuoxing licked his lips. He hadn't expected that he would have to venture into the realm of the gods as soon as he stepped foot into the world of cultivation. 2 billion. A loud shout came from the VIP seats, pulling Yun Nuoxing back from his surging emotions. He raised his head and saw that the banner had been successfully purchased by someone for the astronomical price of 2 billion. Yun Nuoxing's heart flashed with surprise at this huge sum. To be able to fork out such a huge sum of money, this person must be no ordinary person. He just didn't know which great force he belonged to. With that in mind, Yun Nuoxing turned his gaze to the place where the bid had been made. A gray-haired young man was slowly sitting down. He was in the area where the 8 great ancient families were seated. I wonder which family you belong to. The gray-haired man seemed to have sensed something and turned his head abruptly. When he realized that the gaze was directed at Yun Nuoxing, he put on a genial smile and nodded at the two of them before turning back. What sharp senses! Yun Nuoxing stuck out his tongue. He hadn't expected that his probing would be detected by someone else. Little star, why don't you think the celestial spirit tree leaf is up for auction? Could it be that it was too rushed and they didn't have time to prepare it, so they changed it to the next auction? Or is it because it's too precious and they intend to keep it for themselves? Yuen played with her fine black hair in boredom. Her lively eyes kept darting around the auction hall, and she yawned loudly from time to time. It seemed like she was about to fall asleep. I don't think they're going to keep it for themselves. They don't know our identities and usually won't act rashly. Yun Nuoxing shook her head and pointed at the 2 remaining golden plates on the auction stage. Maybe it's there. Aren't there 2 more that haven't been auctioned? Yuen stuck out her tongue and smiled slyly. How much do you think those people will fight over it? Yun Nuoxing shook her head. After a while, she said, it shouldn't be much worse than the ice spirit flame flower. Although it's only a leaf, it's already many times better than many other spiritual herbs in the world. Yun Nuoxing's gaze swept across the 9 VIP seats. She wondered what they thought. The next item to be auctioned was added at the last minute on someone's request. Because it's a little precious, it was put at the end. On the auction stage, the white-haired old man wiped the sweat off his forehead and took a few deep breaths. Then he bowed to the crowd. The floor of the auction stage suddenly cracked open. The floating platform carrying the old man slowly descended until it disappeared. Then another platform slowly rose up. Xingju appeared in front of the crowd with a warm face. It's finally starting. Seeing this, Yuen seemed to have understood something. She immediately jumped up from her chair. Mei Mao stared at the auction stage below without blinking. As for the crowd, they looked at Xingju strangely. They didn't understand why he was doing this. Xingju bowed to the crowd. Then, he took out a pair of black gloves that shone with starlight. He put them on gently and waved his hand. As he waved his hand, a golden plate that shone with golden light flew in front of him. The light gradually dissipated, revealing a dark golden box that was slightly bigger than a palm. Perhaps all of you already know what the main item of the auction held by my Constellation Pavilion is. I also know that many of you are here for this item. However, before that, let us first see another rare treasure. Xingju twisted his wrist and wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. The smile on his face slowly disappeared. Then, he nervously lifted the lid of the box. A bright green light instantly lit up the entire palace. Endless life, energy, soared into the sky like hundreds of wild dragons dancing in the sky. The rich life, energy, even formed a thin layer of fog. Many strange phenomena appeared in the surroundings. It was as if a deity had descended to the mortal world, illuminating the world with light. Ordinary people didn't think much of it. They stared at the auction item that was emitting boundless life energy. They wanted to see what it was. Of course, even if ordinary people didn't recognize it, it didn't mean that the people in the VIP seats didn't react. The moment the lid was lifted and the green light soared into the sky, everyone in the VIP seats except for Yun Nuoxing stood up. Their faces were filled with shock. Their eyes were wide open as they stared at the green light. Their mouths were wide open, and they didn't say anything for a long time. I believe everyone knows about the ghost tree forest that caused a great uproar a while ago. I believe everyone knows what appeared in it. Standing in that ball of green light, Xingju glanced at it with a shocked look, then said with a calm voice. Everyone was stunned. Ghost tree forest? Wasn't there a soul-devouring tree? However, it had already been destroyed by the glories will tree. Thinking of this, many people reacted. Then, almost everyone stood up with a bang, staring with their dead fish eyes. They all felt their mouths go dry. Could it be? The energy barrier in the auction house had unknowingly become much thicker. Runes flowed on the surface, and it looked indestructible. The Constellation Pavilion has strengthened its defenses. Seeing that the barrier was gradually solidifying and the auras of many experts had secretly appeared, even the power of the stars in the starry sky became restless. It seemed like it wanted to get rid of the people with evil intentions in an instant. Yui nodded and said softly, "There's no other way. After all, the auction item is too precious. If the item is stolen in public, losing face is a small matter. However, they don't have a good reason to explain it to the person who entrusted the item to them. Everyone is right. This is the second last auction item in the Constellation Pavilion. It's one of the highlights of the auction, and it's also the reason why many people came to the Sourcepeak region. Xingju looked at the green light in the golden box. A hint of desire flashed in the depths of his eyes. He raised his head slightly and said word by word, "The leaf of the glories will tree." Chapter 38. Boom! Xingju's low and deep words were just like a 5,000-kilogram bomb that directly stirred a great commotion within the auction ground. Countless exclamations sounded, after which many heated eyes that contained a greedy glow shot over. However, this did not include those large factions in the VIP seats who possessed quite a great amount of strength. Of course, this did not mean that they were not interested in this heavenly spirit leaf. However, when such a huge event suddenly spread to their ears, their first reaction was not only excitement, but also, of course, shock. The people in the 9 VIP seats were extremely astonished. They did not know what to do as they looked at the palm-sized leaf that contained endless vitality. For a moment, they were all stunned. They looked at each other for who knows how many times, shaking their heads like a rattle drum and nodding like chickens pecking at rice. They had indeed brought many things, but they were all used to bid for the final item in the auction. However, this heavenly spirit leaf that had suddenly appeared was like a heavy hammer that violently knocked them out. Even those shrewd, old fellows were stunned. They were hesitant and did not know what to do. Why did they suddenly do such a thing? The heavenly spirit tree was in the top 3 of the heavenly treasure ranking. This name was enough to prove its strength. There was no need for any reason. Every strand, every inch, every piece of it was truly a priceless treasure. If it was casually thrown into the outside world, it would be enough to cause a bloody battle. If it was not for the powerful deterrence of the Constellation Pavilion, it was likely that this palace would have been flooded with blood. There was no other reason other than this small leaf was too tempting. Damn it, who exactly is it? Why would they do such a thing at such an important time? I'm really a dog. Why are they doing such a thing in an auction for no reason? It's me, the one selling the leaf, come out. I know you're in this auction house. If you crawl over, I guarantee that I won't beat you to death. Mother Faster's cur, you bastard. Do you still want to let me live? I didn't bring so many things. I can only look but not buy. Can't the auction be properly conducted? TSK. How dare you bark when you don't have the strength? You should leave as soon as possible. Damn it. What did I do to provoke you? Damn it. You dare to say that you brought enough things to bid. Damn it. So what if I brought enough? 2 billion. F*CK. What are you looking at? 3 billion. What's wrong with looking at you? 3.5 billion. Damn it. You want to fight with me? For billion. I'm rich and don't care about money at all. If you have the ability, send over your coffin capital. I'll take them all. 5 billion. Just you wait. Sooner or later, I'll dig up your ancestral grave. 5 billion. I'm just afraid that you'll be killed by the trap. 6 billion. F asterisk CK. So what if you have money? 1 million kilograms of superior grade Xian crystals. Bitch, don't think you're the only one with Xian crystals. 2,300,000 gene. 150 kilograms of fine grade glazed crystals. What the F asterisk CKU bitch? 1,200,000 caddies of fine Xian crystals. I sue you. 1 million kilograms of top-grade Xian crystals. You rotten old man. 200,000 caddies of immortal-grade Xian crystals. You old bastard. 25,000 caddies of celestial-grade Xian crystals. Bastard. Xian crystals were no big deal. 550,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. F asterisk CK. You're so pretentious. Everyone calm down. Please calm down and listen to me. If you can fight, try not to quarrel. The auction site quieted down instantly. Everyone looked at each other for a while. A moment later, damn it, those who want to fight, come out and fight one-on-one. 550,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. I'm not afraid of you. Brothers, kill him. 350,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. Damn it, you think you're the only one who has people. 350,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. Beat him to death. 200,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. F asterisk CK off. 250,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. Little bastard, stop. Yes, it was you who beat me last time. Give me your life. 350,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. Boundless deity, that bald guy, come here. 350,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. Amitabha, almsgiver, calm down. I'll offer 360,000 caddies of high-grade, glazed crystal essence. Are these people crazy? Yin Nuashing and her companion retreated to the side with the entire floating platform. Looking at the chaotic scene, they couldn't help but twitch their faces. Like wolves and tigers couldn't describe their fierceness. Fierce tigers coming down the mountain couldn't describe their bravery. Everyone at the scene had evolved into a group of lunatics, like a group of demons dancing wildly and the reappearance of the god of death. The people from the Constellation Pavilion who were responsible for maintaining order were rushed to the side by the crazy people. The huge palace suddenly became a martial arts arena for revenge and redress of grievances. All kinds of energy fluctuations broke through the sky, and colorful balls of light flew in all directions. The temperature of the auction house was sometimes cold and sometimes hot, and a fierce wind blew everyone around. However, when these people were fighting crazily, they did not forget to bid with all their might. The momentum was definitely not much weaker than the fighting scene at the auction house. The people from the Constellation Pavilion had already retreated to the energy barrier. The ordinary people had also retreated to the side. They were dumbfounded as they watched the auction turn into a martial arts competition. Xingju was also a little dumbfounded. Many people at the scene were not weaker than him. Some were even stronger than him. If he rashly went up to stop them, he was afraid that he wouldn't even know how he died. At that moment, he and a group of elders stared at each other. No one knew what to do. The people from the 9 great temples and the 8 great ancient families also retreated to the side, like Yin Nuashing and her companion. They looked at the chaotic scene below with pale faces. In a place where tens of thousands of people gathered, the most powerful people were usually not some first-rate forces, but some individual cultivators. They could even do it without any worries or scruples. After taking the items, they could escape into the depths of the mountains and forests. Who could do anything about it? However, although it was a big mess, no one rushed to the energy barrier. After all, if they snatched the items in public, they would be hunted down by the entire Constellation Pavilion. Of course, at this critical moment, they were still bidding for revenge. They were fighting and shouting prices. Hearing this, those who were not involved in the battle were speechless. Why were they still bidding when they were fighting? The huge palace was not damaged in the slightest under such an impact. It was a little unbelievable. A high-grade fire element divine artifact. Boom! A god-level array scroll. Bang! A god-level talisman scroll. Clang! A god-level mystic art scroll. Roar! A god-level secret art scroll. Ah! The fighting and bidding continued. The preciousness of the items being shouted out made the people who heard it feel inconceivable. They didn't expect that other than the colossi and the VIP seats, there were so many people with rich collections. It seemed that many people had brought out their true treasures for this once-in-a-century auction. That's enough. This was the voice of the people at the VIP seats. Couldn't they just bid properly? It's far more intense than I imagined. I didn't expect that a piece of leaf could overturn an auction. Yin Nuashing was speechless. She smiled and shook her head. I wonder if selling a tree branch would overturn an entire city. Ewing pursed her lips and smiled. At most, it would overturn the sky. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. However, she really didn't expect that there would be such an outcome. Fortunately, she didn't choose to sell the half-meter tree branch. Otherwise, this place would have been overturned, little girl. Just as Yin Nuashing and Yun Nuashing were watching the show, a gentle voice suddenly sounded from the side, causing her to be stunned. Yin Nuashing turned her head. The floating platform of the 9 great sacred halls had appeared in front of them at some point in time. The 17 people were staring at the two of them without blinking. The person who spoke was still the beautiful woman from the Divine Wood Palace. Yin Nuashing stood up gently. Her pitch-black eyes, with a hint of golden light, looked at the beautiful woman. After a moment, she opened her red lips and said in a calm voice, "What's the matter?" As she spoke, Yin Nuashing's gaze swept across the 9 great sacred halls elites behind her. In the end, she fixed her gaze on the white-clothed man. Her eyes immediately narrowed, and a faint killing intent condensed in them. Seeing her hostile look, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but shake her head with a bitter smile. Could it be that she really did something wrong? The beautiful woman's goal was still that ice spirit flame flower. Yin Nuashing also expressed that he only needed something that could be used to disguise himself. He wasn't interested in anything else because he had many good things on him. There was no need for him to sacrifice himself for others. In the end, under the strange gazes of the 17 people, Yin Nuashing and Yin Nuashing retreated to the side on the floating platform. Their indifferent look made them feel helpless. Wherever the people from the Temple of Elements went, they were respected as superior existences. When had they ever been looked down upon by someone like this? Let's go. This girl is also a stubborn person. If you want that flower, I'll find it for you in the future. The silver-robed, robust man from the Lightning Divine Hall shrugged and said. The beautiful woman sighed. Her green eyes looked deeply at the 2 people in the distance for a while. Then, she nodded and dispelled the idea of changing places. Hee, big brother now, can we? Lei Ming licked his lips and asked with a grin. Go to hell, don't talk nonsense. Don't provoke people if you have nothing to do. Without waiting for Yin Nuashing to reply, the robust man turned around and patted Lei Ming's head, reprimanding him. Lei Ming hugged his head and kept mumbling. Seeing this, the other 6 elders didn't have any temper. It seems that they're still thinking about it. Only when they were far away did Yuan turn her gaze back to Yin Nuashing and said, It doesn't matter. If they don't cause trouble, we won't bother with them. Yin Nuashing stretched her waist and sat back on the chair. Then, she lazily turned a few times. The chaos in the auction house continued until sunset. Only then did the Constellation Pavilion join forces with the other major powers to suppress the rioting crowd. Then, all of them were kicked out. However, after they were kicked out, the people who still had grievances with each other started to fight again. A monstrous pressure descended on the entire city. Fortunately, it didn't spread to the underground. The people of the Constellation Pavilion also hurriedly rearranged the empty seats in the palace. After nearly an hour, the door was finally opened. The crowd once again surged in. Of course, some people fought their way in and were kicked out in the end. Then, when they came in again, They had already temporarily put everything aside. They fiercely glared at each other and sat down one after another. Aha! There was only a small episode in the afternoon. Everyone, please forgive us. Since it's night now, let's continue the auction. Xingju smiled as if he was trying to curry favor with them. However, he also knew that the news of the auction house almost being overturned had definitely spread. This would affect the reputation of the Constellation Pavilion. Now, he could only secretly rejoice that the auction item wasn't snatched away. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to answer to the seller. Even if he sold himself, he might not be worth his price. Small? Ha! Everyone sneered in their hearts. This was the most impressive small episode they had ever seen in their lives. It was so small that it almost overturned the auction house. This was the most impressive auction in history. It could be written in the history books of the auction house. However, even though they thought so in their hearts, they still laughed along on the surface. They had already overturned the auction house. If they dared to do anything else, even the saints would probably explode in anger. If they angered the Constellation Pavilion, then it would be fun. After an entire afternoon of communication, everyone had gotten to the bottom of the matter. No one engaged in a meaningless competition. They just sat at the side and watched the big shots roar. Therefore, the auction of the Celestial Spirit Leaf ended in less than 5 minutes. The final winner, as expected, was the person in the VIP seats. He belonged to the Sacred Weapon Shrine. As for the people of this temple, they had devoted their lives to the research of the strength of weapons. They specialized in collecting those strange weapons and researching and modifying them. Generally speaking, it was actually quite annoying because no matter who it was or what force it was, they would try their best to take away the weapons they had set their eyes on. They had unique methods to deal with weapons, and without a special method, it was basically impossible to resist. After this person announced that the Holy Flame Stone weighed 500 kilograms, the entire crowd fell silent. The Holy Flame Stone, as its name suggested, was of the fire attribute. It was extremely intense. Only in places with strong yang energy could such a stone be born. Although it could be absorbed by people to speed up their cultivation, it wasn't the best use. Its greatest value was to be used for forging. Weapons and armors that had been forged and strengthened by the Holy Flame Stone could be attached with rich fire elements, thus increasing their attack power and defense power. However, the only limitation was that the Holy Flame Stone could only be used to forge or strengthen 8th grade equipment. It couldn't be used for other grades. Seeing the people from the Sacred Weapon Shrine happily winning the auction, a sense of disgust appeared in everyone's hearts. They didn't know what kind of disgusting weapon they were going to fiddle with. I seem to have forgotten to limit it to gold coins. Hearing the final bid, Yanoashing widened his eyes in shock. Then he laughed bitterly. After all this time, he had brought back a 500-kilogram stone. He had forgotten that most people like to barter. Chapter 39. Clap, clap. After completing the bidding for the Heavenly Spirit Leaf, Xingju clapped his hands. The clear clapping suppressed the noise in the entire place. After which, he waved his hand and the surrounding auction stage split open. 5 platforms rose, and 5 black-clothed old men with cold expressions slowly appeared. One of the old men was holding a small box that was covered by a black cloth. These few old men surrounded Xingju in the middle and faced him. A faint sharp energy lingered around their bodies. Their eagle-like sharp eyes slowly swept across their surroundings. Seeing how careful they were, as though they were facing a great enemy, the auction ground became quiet. A strange atmosphere enveloped the entire palace, causing everyone to feel a little pressured. Everyone, I believe you all know what the most important item of our Starry Pavilion's auction this time around is. This old man also knows very well that many of the people present have come for that item. After adjusting his black gloves, the smile on Xingju's face slowly faded as he said in a deep voice, "However, I hope that what happened earlier won't happen again. Otherwise, don't blame the Constellation Pavilion for not showing mercy." Everyone laughed dryly. The place was dead silent. While Xingju was speaking, the old man, who was carrying the small box covered by a black cloth, cautiously placed it on the auction stage, after which he slowly withdrew and returned to his original position. Both of his arms were spread open as he joined the other two old men in the air. A mysterious formation also appeared on the ground. A transparent barrier that was flickering with starlight slowly appeared between the five old men. It looked mysterious and indestructible. It could be said that the protection this time had reached the level of an iron wall. There was a layer of protection from the palace and a layer of protection from the people. If there was really an ignorant person who wanted to snatch it, he would have to break through 2 layers of high-level protection in front of everyone and defeat the 5 god emperors, after which he would have to personally face Xingju, who was at the divine underworld grade. It was not that there was no one with such strength in the auction. However, if he really did that, he would definitely be attacked by the crowd. With so many people, he would not even know how he died if he was hit by a single punch. Moreover, Xingju and the rest were not wooden dummies. Would they just watch someone break the formation and take the item? Impossible. However, it was no wonder that the Constellation Pavilion's defenses were so tight. It was just that the value of this item definitely exceeded that of the Celestial Spirit Tree Leaf. Otherwise, it would not have been placed at the very end. Furthermore, with such a valuable item, if one was not careful, one might even be stolen. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. If it weren't for the fact that the Constellation Pavilion had some deterrence in the realm of the gods and possessed such a miraculous item, it was likely that someone would have destroyed the pavilion to take the item. In this world, there were still people who did some shady things. Xingju lifted his head to look at the heated gazes from the VIP seats. His eyes paused on a few spots. The energy in his body surged as he quickly tore the black cloth off. The black cloth fell off in front of everyone's eyes, revealing a black box made of unknown materials. Under the illumination of the light, the black box was dim, but a faint cold air leaked out. Buzz. The netherworld rune sword in Yun Nuoxing's forearm suddenly trembled. Waves of divine consciousness were transmitted to Yun Nuoxing's mind. The sudden change startled Yun Nuoxing. She gently touched the small sword pattern with her left hand and asked, "Netherworld rune, what's wrong?" However, the netherworld rune sword did not respond. It went silent again. Everyone took a deep breath. Their eyes widened as they stared at the black box without blinking. They even held their breaths. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the grand finale of the Constellation Pavilion's auction. It's also the goal of many people. This is... Xingju flipped the lid over. Dazzling light suddenly shot out, making everyone close their eyes out of habit. The soul of a divine weapon. Xingju covered his eyes with his hand. A beam of black light shot out from his palm and covered the dazzling light. He shouted with a loud voice. Xingju's loud voice was like a heavy bomb that exploded in the auction hall. It caused an explosive sensation. Countless exclamations sounded. Then, many greedy eyes focused on the black box. Inside the black box, there was a spherical crystal the size of a human head, pure white and flawless like suet fat jade. It floated above the box without any support. Moreover, it seemed to have intelligence as it floated around the box. A dazzling light permeated its surface, and countless runes were densely arranged on its surface. The soul of a divine weapon, as the name suggested, was the soul of a weapon. However, not all weapons would have such a large soul of a divine weapon. Only some extremely powerful and high-grade weapons would have such a large soul of a divine weapon. The soul of a weapon came from the weapon. Only when the weapon was destroyed could it be released. However, generally speaking, when the weapon died, the soul of the weapon would also be destroyed. It was impossible to take the soul of a weapon out unscathed, unless there was a forbidden technique that could take away the soul of a weapon the moment it was destroyed, or if an extremely powerful weapon died. The soul of a weapon would not be destroyed. Moreover, such a large soul obviously belonged to the latter. A soul of a weapon that was not destroyed was equivalent to a pure soul without an owner. When it was injected into a weapon, it could give birth to a soul that belonged to the weapon in the shortest time possible. In an instant, the weapon would be strengthened to the same level as the soul of the weapon. In the current era, it was basically impossible for a blacksmith to give a complete soul to a weapon. One reason was that it was extremely difficult, and the other reason was that there was no way. Therefore, although the weapons of the current era had given birth to another existence called deities, and although they had consciousness compared to weapons with souls, they were much weaker. This was because a weapon with the soul of a weapon was, in a sense, a living being. It was not a weapon. Buzz! The Netherworld Ruins sword shot out from Yun Nuoxing's arm with a whoosh. It was surrounded by a dense, purplish black light, but there was no energy fluctuation. Pum! Almost at the same time, Yun Nuoxing also stood up with a bang. The chair was knocked over, and the four-colored evil spirit, I stared at the crystal that was the size of a head. Her heart was in turmoil. Inside the crystal, there was an incomplete array. There was only the eye of the array, and the lines that extended out were cut off halfway. However, there was only a small array left. It was extremely complicated, and its level of mystery was definitely not lower than a high-grade deity array. It was so complicated that it was dazzling. This is... Yun Nuoxing extended his hand to grab the dark ruined sword, and placed it behind his back to prevent others from recognizing it. At the same time, the evil spirit, I quickly carved out the complex, blood-vomiting, incomplete formation. However, it only carved out the edges first, as the central part would take at least a few months to carve out. Then it connected it to the other two incomplete formations in his mind. They were carved out from two inexplicable pieces of jade, one from the Yu family, the other from the primordial ruins. Then the two corners of the array perfectly connected with the incomplete array that she had just obtained, one on the left and one on the right. Weapon spirit, weapon spirit, weapon spirit. Senior Mu Ingzi seemed to have said that the weapon spirit of the Netherworld Ruins sword had dissipated, right? Could it be? Seeing that the three incomplete arrays matched, Yun Nuoxing's eyes widened. She thought of the Netherworld Ruins sword's reaction just now, and then transmitted a message to the Netherworld Ruins sword behind her. Netherworld. That weapon spirit. It can't be your weapon spirit, right? Buzz. The Netherworld Ruins sword trembled and seemed a little confused. It didn't even know why it was so excited. Yu-Yin also stood up, and her jade fingers gently stroked the Netherworld Ruins sword as she asked Yun Nuoxing, "What did the Netherworld Ruins sword say?" Yun Nuoxing had also told her about the Netherworld Ruins sword, and she was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Who would have thought that the weapon ranked first in the Divine Sword record would be right in front of her? However, she didn't make a fuss. She also knew that this news would cause him a lot of trouble. Although it was a damaged divine weapon, it didn't say that it couldn't be repaired. If one day the Nether Void sword was repaired in perfect condition, the entire world would be shocked. Yun Nuoxing shook her head and transmitted a message. Even the Netherworld Ruins sword itself doesn't know. Just now, it was probably an instinctive reaction. Buzz. At this moment, the Netherworld Ruins sword hummed softly again. In its voice, there was a desire for the weapon spirit, and it seemed very human. You want it? Yun Nuoxing tilted her head, looked down, and then tilted her head to the other side. Looking at the people in the VIP seats, she couldn't help but whistle. Ask a tiger for its skin, steal a tiger's food. Buzz. Hearing Yun Nuoxing's murmur, the Netherworld Ruins sword immediately trembled. I know. I can only say that I will try my best. After all, those guys are not easy to deal with. Yun Nuoxing nodded and pulled Yu-Yin to sit down again. She put the Netherworld Ruins sword on her knees and looked at it quietly. According to our appraisal, this weapon spirit was taken from a powerful weapon on the Divine Weapon record. It flew out after the weapon broke. It is very well preserved, and even the original karma has been preserved. Xingju looked at the people in the VIP seats with a smile, and his eyes flashed with a cunning light. Well preserved. Yin Nuoxing almost burst out laughing. He was doing this on purpose, wasn't he? The array inside was badly damaged. Except for the core array, which was very well preserved, the rest was basically gone. Who knew how many pieces were missing? Bang! Sensing that the auction hall had become chaotic again, the black-clothed old men and Xing Ju suddenly released a majestic aura. 6 pairs of eyes flashed slowly in the auction hall. As their eyes swept across the hall, the chaotic hall was instantly frozen like boiling water, and it quickly quieted down. Some people curled their lips unhappily, but they didn't say anything. It was better to be quiet in someone else's territory. There were gods here, and it would be fun to provoke them. Everyone, please abide by the rules. Just now, you've already broken the rules once. This time, I'll have to trouble you to restrain yourselves. If you're interested, speak. Don't fight. Otherwise, although Xing Ju's eyes were narrowed into slits, he still spoke with a gentle voice. Then, he looked deeply at a few places and waved his hand. Now, the auction for the weapon spirit begins. Chapter 40. As Xing Ju's words fell, the huge auction ground fell into a strange silence. Countless pairs of eyes looked directly at the VIP seats. Everyone knew that given the preciousness of the divine weapon's soul, it was naturally impossible for an ordinary person to obtain it. Among those present, the only ones who had the strength and qualifications to participate in the bidding were some of the large factions and first-rate factions in the VIP seats. However, while everyone was looking at the VIP seats, the people in the VIP seats were also looking down. There were also some powerful independent cultivators who could compete with them. They definitely could not be underestimated. Wait! Just as someone was about to speak, Xing Ju suddenly shouted. This caused everyone to look at him in confusion. Xing Ju wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He could not endure being stared at by so many pairs of eyes that were filled with pressure. Hence, he hurriedly said, everyone knows the principle of not showing off one's wealth. Therefore, if there are any friends who are interested in this auction, please enter the auction stage alone and show me the items that you have taken out to exchange. After which, we will choose the person who has taken out the most valuable item to complete the transaction. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. After which, they nodded their heads. They also understood the principle of not showing off one's wealth. Anyone who could take out an item that was comparable to the divine weapon soul would definitely be extremely precious. This was something that everyone could figure out. Yin Nuoxing was also stunned by this rule for a moment. After she recovered, she nodded her head slightly. This way, it would indeed save a lot of trouble. After all, if the items that she took out were too precious and were targeted by others, it might bring about a disaster. This was because any one of the items that he took out could shake everyone's rationality. Although not every item could be compared to the divine weapon's soul, it was still extremely shocking. After all, the items that were left behind by the gods over a dozen eras could be considered peerless after so many years. Everyone had the same thoughts as Yin Nuoxing. Hence, after Xing Ju's words fell, many people's expressions became much more relaxed, and they nodded their heads slightly. Xing Ju heaved a sigh of relief when he sensed the atmosphere gradually relaxing. He nodded at the 5 black-clothed elders. The black-clothed old man also understood. With a move of his hand, the transparent energy barrier flickering with starlight suddenly darkened. A moment later, it transformed into a deep pitch-black color. Specks of white light dotted the sky like stars. At this moment, the situation inside could no longer be seen. As the auction stage was covered by the starry sky, Xing Ju's warm laughter rang out. Everyone, can you relax now? According to the rules, only one person was allowed to enter. Of course, in front of so many people, there shouldn't be anyone who's worried that the Constellation Pavilion is up to no good, right? Since there are no more questions, let's begin. Of course, if you're still worried, you can stand outside the barrier and transmit your voice telepathically. However, the prerequisite is that the information you provide is true Everyone laughed faintly when they heard Xingju's words. How could the Constellation Pavilion dare to play any tricks in such an occasion? Did they not want to survive? Among the forces present, not to mention the 9 elemental palace and the 8 ancient families, just the Star Palace and the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall's foundation was not any weaker than theirs. Even if the Constellation Pavilion provoked them, they would suffer great losses in a fight between the two forces. It was already fortunate that they were not destroyed. Moreover, this was only a branch of the Constellation Pavilion. Its strength was far from being as strong as the headquarters. Not long after Xingju's words fell, the person from the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall in the VIP seats took the lead to stand up. His face was filled with fanaticism. His figure flashed, and he plunged into the barrier. "Little Star, do you have anything that you can put together?" Watching the person from the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall disappear into the barrier, Yuan turned her head and looked at Yun Nuoxing, whose pretty face was filled with a grave expression and could not help but ask. Yun Nuoxing shook his head. Although he had many things on him, he had not seen all of them. Therefore, he did not know what was inside. However, he was very confident in Muingzi's wealth. He just did not know if he could snatch the divine weapon soul from the hands of these well-prepared experts. "Let me see." Yun Nuoxing sighed and closed his eyes. His mind entered the purplish-red pendant and the green ring. Yuan saw that he had closed his eyes and did not want to disturb him. She sat quietly by the side. Mei Mao looked at the pitch-black spatial barrier. Under the countless gazes of the auction house, the person from the Sacred Weapon Divine Hall walked out after about 3 minutes. His face was raised to such an extent that his eyes were almost squeezed out. It seemed like he was very confident in the item that he had taken out. Seeing that someone had successfully come out, some of the people in the VIP seats who had some doubts in their hearts let go of the last trace of worry in their hearts. Shortly after, the gray-haired man from the 8 ancient families stood up and quickly flashed into the barrier. With a start, naturally, many people followed suit. One after another, people rushed into the barrier. However, there were also people who stood outside the barrier and were enveloped by a layer of black light. They only returned to their seats after a long time. Moreover, most of the people who had tested the barrier did not look good. Clearly, they had not been recognized by the Constellation Pavilion. Of course, there were also some who walked out with smiles on their faces. There were even a few who laughed out loud. It seemed like they were very confident in the item that they had taken out. Yun Nuoxing sat quietly on the chair and was still searching. He wanted to find 1 or 2 divine items that could be comparable to the divine weapon soul. Heavenly Spirit Branch, complete high-level divine level array diagram. Immortal grade, mysterious crystal. Divine grade weapon. Inexplicable elixir. Rare and strange medicinal herbs. Messy accessories. Weird talismans. I'm going to faint. Yun Nuoxing opened his eyes with cold sweat. He looked at Yuan, who was looking at him, and sighed with a little disappointment. Yuan also thought of this and patted his head. Just as she was about to say something to comfort him, she saw him suddenly frown and was stunned for a moment. Yun Nuoxing thought for a while and asked tentatively, "Are there many elemental conversion arrays in the world today?" Hearing Yun Nuoxing's words, Yuan knitted her brows and thought for a long time. Then, she said softly, "There shouldn't be many. Elemental conversion arrays mostly only existed in the ancient times. There might be some forces that have been passed down from that time, but most of them were lost in the inheritance. So, there shouldn't be many." Yun Nuoxing nodded. He didn't make up his mind and continued to immerse his mind in the treasure hunt. Seeing him continue to close his eyes, Yuan sighed and didn't say anything. While waiting like this, the muscular man from the Lightning Divine Hall in the 9-element shrine also stood up. His figure trembled and disappeared from where he was like a ghost. Lightning element, known as the fastest speed under the light element. Yun Nuoxing opened his eyes as if he had sensed something. He narrowed his eyes slightly. This speed could only be surpassed when he used the light element with all his might. Just as this thought flashed through Yun Nuoxing's mind, the space where the muscular man had just disappeared slightly trembled. His figure actually appeared once again. Furthermore, There was a faint smile on his face. It seemed that he was quite confident in the item he had taken out. The muscular man didn't care about the gazes directed at him from all directions. He sat down on a chair and stretched his body. The people in the other VIP seats all frowned slightly. After the muscular man, the people from the Star Palace in another VIP seat also slowly stood up. They calmly entered the barrier and walked out a few minutes later. There wasn't the slightest movement on their faces, so no one could tell what the result was. When Yin Nuoxing opened his eyes once again, other than them, the rest of the 10 VIP seats had also sent people in. At this moment, they were looking at Yin Nuoxing with curious expressions. No one knew what they were thinking. I can only brace myself and go up. Yin Nuoxing sighed and slowly stood up. As the target of many people's attention, Yin Nuoxing's actions undoubtedly attracted the attention of many people in an instant. They were all very curious as to what this beautiful girl, who had made the 10 major forces of the divine realm give up on competing with her, would take out to snatch the divine weapon soul. Yin Nuoxing didn't care about those gazes. Her figure moved and gently streaked across the space. She stood outside the barrier for a while before stepping in. The space changed and starlight hung down in the surroundings. It was hazy and dreamy, as if they were really in an interstellar space. The surroundings were faintly illuminated. With a single step, she saw the smiling Xingju and the white-haired old man. "Haha, goddess of Taiyuan, this old man has been waiting for your turn. Now that we've met at such a close distance, you really do live up to your reputation." Xingju looked at Yin Nuoxing with a smile. There was a hint of envy in his eyes. "You recognize me?" Yin Nuoxing's pupils shrank slightly. However, she didn't have much of a reaction in her heart. Since she had been recognized, she should think about what to do first. "Haha, the heaven-defying senior of the Pavilion of Divination said that you would come, so you will definitely come. Moreover, you're the only girl among so many people." Xingju smiled faintly and said, "Goddess, what do you plan to exchange for the divine weapon soul?" Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at the white, jade-like divine weapon soul. She seemed to feel that the netherworld ruins sword in her arm was somewhat excited. She turned her head and looked at Xingju. Under Xingju's blazing gaze, Yin Nuoxing thought for a while. Then a scroll shot out from her pendant. There were many patterns on the surface of the scroll. 5 areas of different colors were flowing with a faint golden light. Element Conversion Array. It can convert the basic 5 elements into the light element. With a gentle wave of her hand, the 5-colored scroll flew towards Xingju. Yin Nuoxing sighed. Initially, he saw the fire element being converted into the light element in Fire Cloud Palace. Later on, he discovered 4 other types in Mu Yingzi's collection. They were also converted into the light element. However, they were useless to him. Out of boredom, he used the evil spirit eye to mix the 5 arrays together. Perhaps it was due to the evil spirit eye's unique analysis and combination effect. The process of mixing the arrays didn't have too many problems. The advancement that he had slept for 5 months was successfully completed. Light element? Upon hearing this element, Xingju and the white-haired old man's eyes instantly widened. Their eyes were filled with joy and a faint struggle. Chapter 41. The light element was the most mysterious and rare element. Nobody was unfamiliar with it. It was irresistibly attractive to Xingju and the others. It was common knowledge that when a god reached the level of deity emperor, they would be able to control their natal element to the point of perfection. At that time, they could try to incorporate a new element into their body. Furthermore, the first time they tried to incorporate a heart element into their body was the least dangerous. Therefore, when a god reached the level of a godly emperor, he or she would try their best to find something related to the second element they needed so that they could incorporate the new element into their body without any danger. The light element was the first choice of many people because it had the fastest speed. It was said that it could break all spells with speed. Of course, the attack power of the light element was not to be underestimated, especially in areas with light. As long as there was a huge gap between the two realms, the light element would be invincible. Of course, it was easy to think about it, but difficult to put into practice. Even the people of the Light Temple didn't know how to regenerate the light element for others. After all, the light element in their bodies had their own aura, so they couldn't refine it. However, with this element conversion matrix, they could condense the endless light element. Perhaps they could incorporate it into their bodies and make it their second life element. All these years, Xingju had been secretly preparing things related to the light element, from the matrix to the materials. All he needed to do was to capture a disciple of the Light Temple alive to study it. He wanted to find the right opportunity to incorporate the new light element into his body. It could be said that the sudden appearance of this spirit design had really smashed into his heart. The excitement in his eyes lasted for a long time before it gradually disappeared. Xingju carefully grabbed the scroll and opened a small corner in front of Yun Nuoxing. After confirming that there was indeed a matrix engraved on it, he turned around and let the white-haired old man take a look. He stared at the edge of the matrix for a while. The white-haired old man nodded and said in a deep voice, "That's right. It is indeed a conversion matrix. I have appraised so many of them. I can't be wrong." Hearing the white-haired old man, Xingju's smile widened. He gently closed the scroll and looked at it with reluctance. Then, he threw it back to Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing sighed. She stared at Star Rule and asked tentatively, "What do you think of this formation, Star Pavilion Master?" "That's right. I think that anyone who sees it will be tempted." Xingju nodded. He hesitantly looked at the white-haired old man before looking at the 5 black-robed old men. He rubbed his chin before lifting his head to smile at Yun Nuoxing and said, "Since Miss Goddess has already taken out the item to exchange for the divine weapon, please return to your seat and wait for a while. Let us old fellows have a discussion. The owner of the divine weapon spirit should be decided in this auction." Yun Nuoxing nodded. He grabbed the scroll and put it into his ring. Then he nodded to Xingju, turned around and walked out of the enchantment. After watching Yun Nuoxing leave the barrier, the smile on Xingju's face slowly disappeared. He frowned as if he was in a difficult situation. The 5 black-clothed old men who set up the formation also walked over. They stood beside Xingju and the white-haired old man without moving. "Old Bai, what do you think?" After thinking for a long time, Xingju put his hands behind his back and asked the white-haired old man with a frown. Hearing this, the white-haired old man also frowned. His finger tapped on his arm for a long time before he slowly said, "The chief family's light transforming pill can allow one to turn the elements in one's body into light elements for a short period of time. Although it looks very powerful, it has quite a number of side effects. It might cause the elements in one's body to become less pure. There are many side effects. As for the bright sun formation that the lightning divine hall took out, it requires 7 people to work together to condense pure light elements in a short period of time. Although this will not reduce the purity of the elements, it will severely exhaust one's life force. It will be difficult to replenish it. If any accident happens, one might directly lose one's life. It can be said that it is an extremely dangerous thing. The forbidden artifact of the sacred artifact shrine also possesses extremely pure light element. Although it requires a lot of energy to activate the artifact, it's countless times safer than other artifacts. However, it can only be used 3 times, the sacred artifact shrine said. The goddess of Taiyuan's 5 elemental conversion formation can convert the 5 basic elements into light elements. However, the pure energy that is converted can only be used for refinement. It cannot be used directly. If one fails, being seriously injured is a small matter. If one is careless, the process of fusing the elements will turn into ashes. It can be said that it is extremely tempting, but it is only a gamble. Hearing the white-haired old man's analysis, Xingju nodded. He sighed and helplessly said, "Although I have prepared for the light element for so many years, but..." Speaking up to here, Xingju looked at the 5 black-clothed old men and frowned. The 5 old men raised their heads and glanced at him. Their voices were stiff as they said word by word. First, carry out the ancestors' order. Do not make the slightest mistake. They came because of this order. That thing needs to be strengthened. Otherwise, why would so many things related to the light element suddenly appear? The white-haired old man shook his head with a bitter smile. I know. Xingju sighed and nodded. He rubbed his palms with his fingers and said in a deep voice, I will obey the ancestors' order. Then use it. Seeing that Xingju had made up his mind, the 5 black-clothed old men also retreated to their respective corners. The white-haired old man nodded slightly and retreated. When Yin Nuoxing came out of the barrier, she saw tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pairs of eyes looking at her. Her heart stopped beating for a moment. However, her beautiful face remained calm as she quietly floated back to the VIP seats. When she didn't see anyone looking at her, she heaved a sigh of relief. The situation might not be too good. Although I think I've taken out my rarest item, it is still not enough. Yin Nuoxing wiped the cold sweat off her forehead and smiled bitterly at Yuan, who was rolling her eyes. When Xingju held the scroll of elemental conversion array, he was very surprised at first. However, after calming down, Yin Nuoxing could clearly see a trace of struggle and hesitation in his eyes. It seemed that among the items taken out by the various factions, at least one of them had moved his heart. And because of this, Yin Nuoxing's originally low confidence was immediately reduced to a negligible level. It's okay. If it really doesn't work, there are still other methods. Many factions are here for the weapon's soul. Perhaps there is still a chance. Yuan blinked at Mei Mao and patted her head to comfort her. She also knew that it was still too early for them to compete with the established factions. Although Yin Nuoxing had obtained Mu Ingzi's inheritance, it wasn't his after all. He didn't organize it properly, so it was natural for him to be at a disadvantage. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. If it weren't for the fact that the Netherworld Ruin Sword seemed to be connected to the weapon's soul, he wouldn't have continued to compete for it. It would be troublesome if he accidentally offended those factions that were eyeing him covetously. Unfortunately, he was already involved. He had already crossed half of the river, and he had no choice but to cross the remaining half. The Netherworld Ruin Sword had been by Yin Nuoxing's side since the day he descended from the desert. According to Mu Ingzi, the Netherworld Ruin Sword had never changed hands. In other words, he might be the person who had once held the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Perhaps he could follow this information and connect to the past, which was the past before he lost his memories. Since it was related to his past, then he had to take action no matter what. Most importantly, that towering tree, that voice that urged Yin Nuoxing to go home, the only thing left in his memories, seemed to be constantly urging him to go home. In Yin Nuoxing's heart, the person that he couldn't let go of the most was the person closest to him. He didn't know who that voice belonged to, nor did he know what kind of person it was. In the worst-case scenario, it was just an ordinary person. How long could an ordinary person live? Only a few hundred years. He could wait, but could it? From a moment Yin Nuoxing stepped out of the Qin residence in Xingling City, he was prepared for anything. Nothing could stop him from recovering his memories. Wait, I suddenly thought of something. Yin Nuoxing suddenly thought of something. He looked at Yuan excitedly and quickly said, Why do I have to dress up as a girl? Can't I just wear a black robe to cover my face? And it's much more convenient. Yuan glanced at him and gently put down her teacup. She slowly turned her head and muttered softly, Hey, I've been discovered. Huh. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. He almost flipped the VIP seats over. Don't you think it's very beautiful? Yuan stuck out her tongue and said with a playful smile, It's quite beautiful. Yin Nuoxing nodded. Then he suddenly realized something and almost shouted, No, that's not the point. TSK, if I didn't come out like this, there wouldn't be a goddess from the Taiyuan region. There would be a strange black robe man from the Taiyuan region. That's the point? Are you sure you're not playing with me? Ah, there are stars. Yuan pointed at the sky and looked past the transparent palace. She looked as excited as a child who had discovered something new. Listen to me. While the two of them were fooling around, the entire auction house fell into silence. The scarlet moonlight shone through the palace and shone on everyone's faces. It should have been a gorgeous and beautiful scene. However, for some reason, the atmosphere in the auction house was quite strange. After Yin Nuoxing came out, no one else entered the auction house. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the star-like barrier. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Sweat silently slid down their cheeks, and they could faintly hear the beating of their hearts. The 10 minutes of waiting felt as long as 10 epochs. Finally, the barrier dimmed. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Only the people in the VIP seats remained calm. The barrier dissipated. Inside, Xingju was still standing in the middle of the auction stage. 5 black-robed old men stood in 5 different directions, emitting a cold aura like a long spear. Cuckoo, everyone. After the selection earlier, my constellation pavilion has finally come to a decision. Xingju's eyes looked all around him as he spoke with a smile. The auction house immediately became even quieter after hearing his words. Even the faintly discernible heartbeat had disappeared. Everyone's eyes contained a trace of nervousness and curiosity as they focused on Xingju. Under everyone's gazes, Xingju smiled and reached out his hand. He slowly swept his hand across the 10 VIP seats and said with a smile, "After the internal discussion of the Constellation Pavilion, the final winner of this auction is..." He slowly moved his finger twice, which made the hearts of the people in the VIP seats jump up and down, then 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 jump up and down again. While the crowd was staring blankly, Xingju suddenly turned around and pointed at a certain VIP seat. Sacred Weapon Divine Hall. Xingju's words had just sounded when the atmosphere in the auction house froze. The corners of the mouths of many people in the VIP seats were slowly pulled into a dense and cold arc. Chapter 42. Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. Yin Nuoxing said the name softly. He took a deep breath, rubbed his forehead with his fingers, and exhaled deeply. He didn't expect this, but it was within his expectations. It seemed that his formation map was not valuable enough. Should he learn something else? It seems that what the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace took out is more precious than the formation map you fused together. Yu Yin, who was beside him, touched his head and gently comforted his turbulent emotions. Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and felt a little unhappy. After all, it was a big force. The depth of their foundation was beyond words. Even if they lost. The palace was quiet for a moment. Finally, there was a violent fluctuation. Countless shocked eyes turned to the VIP seats floating in the corner in midair. Exclamations exploded in the auction house. Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. I didn't expect it to fall into the hands of such a disgusting force. Poor weapon soul. It used to be a living creature, but now it is at the mercy of others. I don't know what disgusting things they will come up with this time. Back then, they also obtained the souls of divine weapons. In the end, they developed a divine weapon, which forcibly cut off all life within a radius of millions of miles. Even now, this place is still a barren land. I wonder what kind of harmful things will happen this time. The 9 Elements Divine Palace and the 8 ancient families will not sit still. There will be a good show to watch. There was a burst of discussion in the hall. Compared with the noisy noise below, the VIP seats were unusually quiet. Cold gazes shot out from the other 9 VIP seats and all gathered in the direction of the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. Although the latter's influence was great, they should be able to do something for the weapon soul. They should be able to ignore those trivial matters. Moreover, the righteousness was on their side. In the past, the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace used a weapon soul to refine a piece of heaven and earth into ashes. There were no less than 10 such incidents. Although they were besieged and annihilated by several powerful forces, it was said that they did not succeed and only destroyed the weapon soul. However, the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace was much more restrained in the later stage. Those tragic things did not happen again, and those forces had no reason to interfere. However, This time, it was another weapon soul. They could not give it to the sacred weapon divine palace. The sacred artifact, Sacred Hall, was very quiet in the face of the unfriendly gazes around them. They were not here to scare them, so they naturally knew what kind of reaction they would have if they won this time. However, if everyone thought that they were quiet and were pushovers, then they would probably have to pay a price for it. On the auction stage, Xingju sighed. He did not care about the rest of the matter. He knew what those powerful forces were thinking. However, he had more important things to deal with, so he would not participate. He forced a smile and said, "Now, the weapon's soul has found its owner. The 100-year auction of the Constellation Pavilion has come to a successful end. I look forward to the next 100-year auction. In the next 2 days, please come to the Constellation Pavilion to retrieve the weapon soul as soon as possible. We will give it to you as it is." As soon as Xingju finished speaking, the people from the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace stood up. The leader of the group, an old man in a black robe, threw out a scroll and opened a space portal. He led the people behind him into the portal and disappeared from everyone's sight. As the people from the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace left, the people in the VIP seats also left one after another. The people from the 9 great divine palaces looked at Yin Nuoxing and then walked out of the auction hall. Yin Nuoxing slowly withdrew her soul energy. She could feel that the people in the VIP seats were more or less filled with killing intent. "It's going to rain." Yin Nuoxing took a sip of tea and gently put down the teacup. She smiled and stood up. She walked out of the auction hall with Yuan, goddess of Tai Yuan. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to leave, a faint laughter suddenly sounded behind Yin Nuoxing. Although Yin Nuoxing had a stomach full of resentment for being called a girl, perhaps because he was used to it, or perhaps because he had heard too much of this strange title, or perhaps because he was confused by Xingju's shout, he subconsciously turned his head. Yuan secretly scolded him for being an idiot. By the time he reacted, his head had already turned a third of the way. Yuan sighed in her heart and said, "Little star, I'm sorry." She quickly waved her hand, slap. The crisp sound of slap caused everyone to stop. They all looked at the two beauties in astonishment. They didn't know what had happened. "It hurts." Yin Nuoxing bitterly smiled. However, he didn't turn his head. This slap was very beautiful. However, he also muttered, "Can't you be gentler? My face is burning." Yin Nuoxing went along with the act. One of her hands held her face that was completely red from the slap. Traces of fresh blood were forcefully squeezed out from the corner of her mouth. She stared at Yuan with a face full of grievance. Tears continued to surge in her eyes. Her eyebrows were also squeezed together and gently trembled. Her other hand tightly gripped her red dress. Her pitiful appearance caused the surrounding people's desire to protect her to greatly increase. The 17 people behind her were the 17 people from the 9 great temples, especially the beautiful green-robed woman who had just spoken. They all looked at this scene in a daze. They didn't know what had happened. They all looked confused. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen sisters quarrel before?" Yuan put her hands on her slender waist and frowned. Mei Mao looked around fiercely. She paused for a moment at the people from the 9 great temples. She pretended to be angry. She pulled Yin Nuoxing with one hand and hurriedly walked out. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know what had happened. This girl seemed to be the one in the VIP seats in the auction house. Could it be that she had lost too much when she bought the Ice Spirit Flame Flower and came out to quarrel with her sister and got hit? The silence lasted for a moment. Someone coughed. Then, everyone shuddered and returned to normal. They went back to doing their own things. Only the beautiful woman from the Divine Wood Palace had an abnormal expression. She was the one who had been talking just now. At this moment, she turned her head in astonishment. She imitated the white-robed man and said, "Did I say something wrong?" Hearing this, the other 16 people looked at each other, then looked at Yin Nuoxing and Mei Mao, who had walked away. They all shook their heads, not knowing what had happened between the two of them. Following the perfect conclusion of the auction, the atmosphere in Constellation City became much more festive. With so many people, the entire city was enveloped in a lively atmosphere. However, The news of the auction that day spread out in an instant, especially the last auction item. It spread to every corner of the world at lightning speed. Instantly, many people felt that in this lively atmosphere, there seemed to be a hurricane that was remapping the roadmap. After the auction ended, some of the major forces didn't leave immediately. Instead, they stayed quietly in Constellation City. They secretly arranged spies around the city and even sent people back to their headquarters to ask for help. In a quiet hotel, Yin Nuoxing sat on the bed. Yuan was holding an ice-cold towel and gently placed it on his face. Her slender hand wiped away the trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. She said apologetically, "Little star, does it hurt?" "A little." Yin Nuoxing pursed his lips. He tugged at his red dress and said, "I don't have to wear this outfit anymore, right? If I keep wearing it, I'll really think that I'm a girl. Sooner or later, my mind will become twisted." In this unusually tense atmosphere, Yin Nuoxing and Mei Mao appeared rather calm. "No, you have to wait until you make the snow flame mask. You have to continue using the identity of Yu Exen." Yuan changed the towel and continued to place it on his face. "Don't," Yin Nuoxing wailed. He couldn't bear it the first time he was called that. What if he was called a second time, a third time? He couldn't just slap him every time, right? Buzz. The nether void sword jumped out of Yin Nuoxing's forearm and trembled slightly. "Actually, I think it's quite pretty. It would be a pity to remove it." "Ah." "Even nether void sword, you're making fun of me," Yin Nuoxing screamed in frustration. "Then do you want to recover your identity as the goddess of Taiyuan and be watched like a monkey?" Yuan rubbed his head and teased. "No, then it's fine." "Ah." While the two of them were very calm, reinforcements from the other major forces arrived one after another. They set up an inescapable net outside Constellation City. From the looks of it, they had no intention of hiding at all. It was as if they were going to go all out in the open. In comparison, there was no movement at the residence of the sacred artifact temple. It was as if they didn't care at all. While waiting for the situation to change, Yin Nuoxing brought Yuan to the branch of the Constellation Pavilion on the second day after the auction. When Yin Nuoxing and Yuan visited, Xingju hurriedly welcomed them into the pavilion and greeted them politely. Without any nonsense, he clapped his hands and took out the ice spirit flame flower that Yin Nuoxing bought at the auction. There was also a large pile of sacred flame stones. Yin Nuoxing didn't stand on ceremony. She checked carefully and put them away. Then, she took out a golden card from her pendant and gently placed it on the table. Before he left, he even asked if there were any disguise items that he could use to exchange for it. Although she was short of a piece of snow crystal, she didn't know where to find it. If she could find it in one go or get a new face, it would be much easier. However, Xingju asked someone to check carefully. In the end, he only gave Yin Nuoxing a disappointing conclusion. There wasn't even a piece of snow crystal. If you want to find snow crystal, you can go to some high mountains where it snows. As for the 5 elements conversion array, although I am very interested in it, I most likely have no fate with it. Xingju heard someone's report and told Yin Nuoxing this. In the end, he shook his head in disappointment. Yin Nuoxing was also a little disappointed. However, she still thanked Xingju gratefully. Although she didn't get what she wanted, she still got some information about snow crystal, which was also very good information. There's no need for that. Miss, the celestial spirit leaf can also be considered as a good promotion for the Constellation Pavilion. Selling you some information is nothing. Xingju smiled and waved his hand. It's already like that. Is this really considered publicity? Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and said with a strange expression, "It's already publicity to the point of fighting. Is this really okay?" Xingju laughed loudly when he heard this and didn't say anything. When Yin Nuoxing saw this, she smiled faintly. It was already the best outcome that Xingju didn't blame her. When she thought of this, she turned around and left. Xingju followed her to the door and watched them leave. Then, he rushed into the pavilion as if something important was about to happen. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.